you would think, many people mistakenly think that this is already a protection, that people could not be fired for who they love. And that is the case in some states. But federally, the only people who are protected from being fired in a discriminatory manner are people of protected classes, fired for gender, for race, for religion, not for being gay.
Also age and, I believe, disability.
Yes.
They're just trying to move that. And a number of states have done this.
Yes.
And there's actually a state who's trying to
We're going to get there.
Okay.
Yeah. Senator Jeff Merkley reintroduced this legislation in the Senate. It has been introduced and has not passed before. And House Representative Jared Polis, the most senior openly gay member of the chamber, introduced it in the House of Representatives. So it's really interesting to me that this legislation is being proposed before the Supreme Court has ruled on gay marriage, because so many of our Congress members have come out and said while they may be religiously opposed to gay marriage, they're not for discrimination for LGBT Americans.
Prove it.
Exactly.
Here's your vote to prove
it. Yes.
How much are they going to try to table this bill? We do not want to vote on this one. No.
Right. Because it makes them put their money where their mouth is.
Or it exposes them as their actual motivation behind opposing same-sex marriage.
Right.
Which, I mean, I would
think it's icky.
Whatever the reason.
Right. So, cheers to Jeff Merkley, to Jared Polis, and this bill has a number of co-sponsors, including Tammy Baldwin, Mark Kirk, Susan Collins, Tom Harkin, in the House, Ileana Ross-Laitman. Quite a few number of co-sponsors and supporters are standing up for this legislation. I mean, it is well past time for people to be protected in the workplace despite loving someone of the same gender. It's.
Did you say Mark Kirk?
Yes.
Republican?
Yes.
Illinois?
Yes. This
All right.
is a bipartisan piece of legislation. Susan Collins, Republican in Maine.
Rock and roll.
Ileana Ross-Laitman, Florida, Republican.
Well, the thing is most people don't even realize that you're in many states, an employer can say, you're gay, you're fired.
Right.
You're gay, you're fired.
They don't have to lie about it. They don't have to make up some reason. They don't have to blame it on your track record. They can just say, you're icky, we don't want you working for us.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's absurd in 2013 that this can happen. And it's about time for this legislation to pass. It has been introduced before. Congress has tried to make this a law previously, but was unsuccessful. So
it makes sense because we've spoke about gay rights as being civil rights.
Yes.
And you'll notice that all of the other protected classes you talked about actually came from either the civil rights movement or adding to that civil rights movement as we've gone forward and progressed as a nation.
Right.
This seems like the next logical step, which I'm surprised we haven't taken yet, but I'm glad we're finally entertaining the idea, at least in Congress, even if they vote it down.
And I'm really interested to see how senators, congresspeople who are opposed to gay marriage, yet say they don't support discrimination, vote on this legislation.
Perhaps that they actually are going to vote the way they have been saying they.
If not, I think we should call them out for the hypocrisy, and we will certainly do so when this bill gets voted on.
Because straight marriage is not under attack by this bill.
Right. This
there
isn't even having anything to do
has
with
nothing
marriage.
has nothing to do with anything other than the right to not be fired.
Right. It's an employment, keyword employment, non-discrimination act.
Has anyone come out opposing this yet?
Not that I have seen, but this was just introduced late this week. So they haven't had time. They've been, obstructing other pieces of legislation and haven't gotten to this one yet.
So many bills, so much obstruction, so little time.
Right. And some states, despite such historic legislation being introduced in the federal Congress, some state legislation has been introduced in Washington, not Washington, D.C., but the state of Washington, to preempt this measure and specifically allow businesses to discriminate against people based on sexual orientation.
And the wording of it is very odd to me.
The wording of it to me really, I wasn't alive for the civil rights battles of our time. I was not around to witness people's supposed justification for racism, but this is what I would have to imagine it sounded like.
it actually says you have a right to be bigoted so long as you have
Pretty much.
so long as your religion is bigoted.
Yes. Washington State Bill, State Senate Bill, SB 5927, states that no federal protection should, quote unquote, burden an individual or entity if doing so would be, quote, contrary to the individual's or entity's owners' sincerely held religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs, or matters of conscience. So this goes, they're calling this a religious exception.
Or conscientious objector.
Right.
And can you start that phrase again for me? No federal?
No federal protection.
So in other words, this would kind of negate the law that you're talking about in the House and the Senate.
That's what they're trying
to
do.
do.
Yes.
Good luck with that.
Preemptively.
Wow.
But they're calling this a religious exception. This goes beyond a religious exception because you can be an atheist and say you philosophically oppose to people being gay.
And how is it they ascertain whether or not it's actually held, or what's the phrase they use there?
Sincerely held religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs, or matters of conscience.
How does one judge their sincerity?
I don't know. And this goes a step further even than just combating this anti-discrimination bill about employment. This would actually allow someone to deny services to.
Whoa.
Yes.
So what about like insurance providers?
If it goes against their philosophical beliefs.
Hospitals?
Philosophical beliefs.
Some Catholic, I mean, I don't know that a Catholic hospital would do that, but I'm not saying any entity is entertained doing this or has done this. I'm sure some have.
No, this is in response. This is the very state that flower companies refuse to provide services to gay marriage.
Oh.
It was sponsored by Washington State Senator Sharon Brown, whose district is home to Arlene's Florist, which is the business that's facing 2 lawsuits because they refuse to provide flowers to a gay marriage, to a wedding ceremony. It is in direct response. So, I mean, that type of language, again, I wasn't alive. Shane, you weren't alive before the Civil Rights Act. But can't you imagine that this was the same type of argument used to justify, we don't want black people sitting next to white people at the lunch counter, that as a church we think it's against religion or against our philosophy to marry an interracial couple?
Yeah. Also, it's my business. I can do with it what I want. Was kind of the argument.
Libertarian paradise.
Well, you remember the famous interview that Rachel Maddow did with Rand Paul.
Yeah.
I should be free. You shouldn't tell me how to run my privately controlled and owned property.
Yeah. I would recommend that each and every one of us, despite what state we may live in, give Washington State Senator Sharon Brown's office a call.
That's Sharon.
Sharon, Sharon Brown. She is a Republican from the state of Washington. And let her know what we think about trying to legalize discrimination.
Yeah. I would imagine that's going nowhere in the state of Washington. Washington just does, I don't know every nook and cranny of the state. It seems contrary to the politics of that state, it seems.
It seems contrary to the politics of this entire nation.
But you know that there are small enclaves of complete extremists who hate anyone who's not them. And it can happen in any state.
Well,
I'm from New York. New York is, that's such a blue state. Go into upstate. Yeah,
well, God forbid something like this were to pass. I would say that every gay or even not gay, every business owner that supports the rights of LGBT people should conscientiously object to serve.
That's the other side of the libertarian argument, that the market will direct, and even, I don't care what kind of wedding you're having, just don't go to the businesses that discriminate.
Right.
Drive them right the heck out of business.
Right.
I'm not, at this point, because, call for a boycott.
Yeah, of
businesses
Arlene
discriminate,
Flowers.
to heck with them.
Yeah, absolutely. How about we put a sign, no bigots allowed.
There you go.
I'm down with that. In some good news, since you definitely need to be picked up after that horrible story, a 19-year-old named Boyan Slat, kind of a cool name in my opinion, has appeared to have solved the problem of the Great Garbage Patches. Many people may not be familiar with the Great Garbage Patches, but because of the way our ocean currents circulate, there are at least 5 gyres in ocean currents that collect plastic debris, that because of the way the ocean currents push this material, they collect there, and some of these garbage patches are equivalent size of the state of Texas.
Whoa.
Huge tons of garbage. Well, he has developed what is called an ocean cleanup array, and it could potentially remove over 7 million tons of plastic waste from the world's ocean, and it would only take 5 years to do so.
That's fantastic.
It's really amazing. He's created a device that essentially pushes the plastic into a platform where it could be separated from plankton and small marine life and then stored for recycling. It could save thousands of animal species and thousands of dollars in cleanup costs. And he says that it would increase awareness about this problem because some people still don't believe it.
When you see it all in one place, you're like, whoa,
right.
There's a lot of stuff there.
If you see a picture of open ocean, you don't realize how much is floating just below the surface, or, you know, how vast the problem really is. But by it collecting all in one place, you would see how bad the problem is. So cheers to Boyan Slat. He's our hero this week.
Well,
could be a huge problem.
And I say that the energy companies hire the kid. You can work on radiation and oil too, please.
How about the plastic companies? People who, you know, petroleum companies that produce plastic products.
Sure.
You know, how about some corporate responsibility?
And some innovation, because, you know, they don't want to spend the money to come up with different ways to clean up their messes. They just like to pay the fines because it's far more cost effective.
Well, maybe it's not
These
anymore.
are the types of things that if they invested in these types of projects, that we'd be a little more willing to let them use some of the resources out there if they could be more responsible.
Right.
This kind of responsibility is the thing we're looking for in our corporations.
I would be interested to see what Boyan Slat could come up with for oil cleanup, because if he's at 19 years old, he's inventing something like this, I'd say he has a great future in protecting our planet.
Amen.
But speaking of corporate responsibility, or lack thereof.
I was going to say, who?
Yeah, we have quite a few stories this week about the latter, the lack thereof. Starting with a big safety inspection, or rather lack thereof. Social auditing firms responsible for guaranteeing the safety of garment workers in countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, China, and Latin America, many of the places where we've seen these recent fires, building collapses, and huge loss of life, 200, 300 people at a time. Well, this is all part of the corporate self-regulating. The groups responsible, called Social Accountability International and Fair Labor Association, are groups that essentially the corporations have put into place to monitor the safety regulations at these garment plants. Well, they're not doing such a good job. In fact, one of the garment factories that recently burned down had just earned a certification from one of these social auditing groups as a safe and fair place to work. So unsurprisingly, this self-regulation is not working out so well. There's a great report from the AFL-CIO called Responsibility Outsource that goes into much more detail than we have time to get into here. But they call this certification process a facade of voluntary and non-binding scrutiny comprised of conflicts of interest. So, yeah, of course they're saying everything's fine because they stand to make a buck by keeping those jobs outsourced. And we have even more corporate irresponsibility stories that we're going to get into this week, but we're going to have to plug our great guests coming up. Matthew Filipovich, Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival, and David Bender of Progressive Voices. Lots in store today, and while you're listening to the show, we want to remind you to go over to Democracy for America and vote for Jacob Dean, who's running for a Netroots Nation scholarship for this year.
Yeah.
You can go and vote for him at nn13.democracyforamerica.com.
And if you've already voted, thank you. And there's one more thing you can do.
Share it.
Share it.
Tweet
Twitter,
it.
Facebook. You know, and if you feel like it, if you really like Jacob, because you know him and he is one of the best people I know, Put it on your Facebook and put that little ribbon on it. Pin it to the top.
Yes, so that everybody who visits your page will see that and see that you suggested it. He would do it for you.
Absolutely.
He would do it for you. So lots in store today. Just too much to even mention. Great guests and more here with me and Shano. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. SoFlo Radio, RadioOrNot.com, Progressive Blend Radio, or, of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. We will be right back with more. So stick around.
What kind of a crazy world is this?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Okay, astronaut, you're up. You'll be meeting with Wish Kid Brandon.
Roger, Brandon.
His wish is to see a space shuttle launch.
All systems are go. We are clear for liftoff.
This year, more than 27,000 children will be diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition.
And, Cowboy?
Yes, ma'am.
You'll be meeting with Shayla at a dude ranch in San Antonio.
Let's saddle up.
Some will miss school. Some will miss time with their family and friends.
Princess, are you here?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me from that evil witch.
Juliana wishes for a princess-themed room makeover.
That sounds magical.
But with your help, the Make-A-Wish Foundation can lift their spirits and give them a special kind of hope.
Pirate!
Yar!
You're up for Isaac's wish.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The wishes of thousands of children are waiting to come true.
You can help make my wish happen. Visit wish.org today.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from bradblog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of bradblog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
I think there's something in my soul. It's in the chords, and we both know.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Since the 2010 Citizens United decision, many groups have been hard at work trying to rein in corporate power. Familiar with MoveToAmend.org, GetMoneyOut.com. There's a lot of these really great organizations fighting corporate power. Well, also in response to this issue, last year, the Securities and Exchange Commission indicated that it was considering a new corporate rule, a rule that required corporations to disclose political spending to their shareholders, basically telling them how their money was being spent and providing some transparency in this corporate political, hand-holding. We'll call it to be really nice.
Sleeping together.
Are
you kidding me?
Well, since the S.E.C. proposed that rule, they've received nearly 500,000 comments in response to it, the vast majority in favor, asking them to put forward this rule as, a requirement, making it official.
I'm wondering, were the Supreme Court justices among those 500,000 or whatever? Because they were all for this.
Yes.
In the Citizens United decision.
That was their supposed check.
They said money is speech. They said corporations are people. And if you don't like it, the best thing is transparency.
Right.
And what I envisioned reading the decision was, how you have the ad that's 27 seconds, and at the very end, I'm blah, 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 and I approve this message. Usually the person running for. But since they're now being backed by corporations, I was saying, I'm CEO of blah, 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 and I paid for this message.
Yeah.
Which would be fine.
Right, and some in Congress tried to make that happen. They've proposed legislation to force corporations to disclose what they're spending in the political process, and it's failed every time.
And it's good information for shareholders, because there's probably some shareholders that aren't, if they knew what their corporate boards of directors were.
They might not want to be invested in that company.
They say, stop it or get out.
Or they might really love the idea and they want to invest more. Who knows?
If that's the way we're going to have the rules before we change the Constitution, amend the Constitution. And if you're voting for somebody going into an election, and I've seen all these ads, all this support, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, wait a minute. That corporation that did X, blew up that plant or dumped a bunch of oil, they're the ones supporting them? I'm not so sure about that person.
Right.
What are the associations? Give us that transparency that's necessary to make an informed decision. At least if you're going to flood the place with money, let's know where it came from. Huh?
Right. But efforts to make that happen in Congress have failed completely. So the S.E.C. is taking it upon themselves, and they're just proposing. They haven't even introduced this rule as officially yet. But in response, big old corporate lobbying groups who stand to make trillions off of the legislation that Congress takes on, and the House Republicans themselves who do their bidding, are freaking out about just the possibility that this rule becomes reality.
This is something the S.E.C. should be doing.
Absolutely.
It is. They already have the authority. They have
Security
the authority
and Exchange Commission.
They're not saying every closely held. It's only publicly traded corporations. That's their jurisdiction. Congress already gave them the jurisdiction. They're just proposing the rule, but they want to take that away, which Congress can do.
Right.
And so here comes the battle.
Right. House Republicans have already proposed legislation to make it illegal for the S.E.C. to monitor any corporate political donations.
And I understand the fiery language to make it illegal, but all they would really be doing is saying the grant of authority to the S.E.C. does not include this. Right. It's illegal. What are they going to do? Throw the S.E.C. in jail for doing it? No.
And some of the biggest lobbying firms, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Association of Manufacturers, and this is one we heard about a lot during the budget discussion, the Business Roundtable, the spooky.
It's the CEOs of the Fortune 400 or 500.
Right. Well, they have issued a formal letter and sent it to the CEOs of Fortune 200 companies, asking them to stand against this regulation and refuse to disclose to what they call shareholder activists.
How dare those people that give us all the money know where it goes?
Right.
Are you kidding me?
You know, it's not surprising that these groups are fighting this potential legislation before it has even been announced. But I say bring it to the floor. Bring it to the floor. Let House Republicans vote on it. We know that they're going to vote it down. We know they're going to make sure that they don't give up their corporate spending binky.
That's the benefit, though, of gerrymandering in getting less votes but still having a majority in the House.
Right.
That they don't bring it to the floor. We never see the vote because John Boehner's not going to bring it.
No.
Come on.
No, but
why would they hoist themselves on that petard?
Let Americans know who you really work for. Let investors know how their corporate dollars are really being spent. And if everything is so fine and dandy and everything is perfectly acceptable with what you're doing, then it shouldn't matter. You should be willing to disclose that. And you know what? I don't care what party you're on, what party you're in, what side of the aisle you stand on.
I'm glad we have crew out there.
Yes, me too.
Because they're going to be combing every bill that comes through. Because I could see this being slipped into something like the Monsanto Protection Act.
Oh, yeah.
Because one of those.
A rider somewhere.
A rider, just because I don't think they want that bald vote up or down on this.
And they'll attach it to something that's so monumental that they can't, the Democrats can't oppose it,
what
etc.
What would happen if DeFazio's bill came up on the Postal Service and they attached it to that?
Good point.
Wow, that is a tough one, is it not?
Yeah.
We'll save the post office, but we get to keep our corporate money.
And if if Democrats vote against the corporate money, they're saying, well, Democrats don't support the post office either. That's how Republicans operate. That's their MO.
That's politics.
Yes.
I
hate
to break it to you.
Yes, but the S.E.C. has not officially proposed this yet, and they are still accepting comments. The bill is 4-637, and it's the public disclosure rule. You can submit a comment on it at sec.gov. There's sample letters there that you can share your opinion. So if you think
I think you
this
only
is...
have till the 30th, by the way.
Yes, but you can still do it right now.
Okay.
So if this is something you support, in addition to Move to Amend and getmoneyout.org and all these great sites, take a few minutes today and submit your comment to the Security and Exchange Commission. We will be right back with more. Lots of stuff in store today on Talking Left. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to me, Danielle, and Shano, and we will be right back.
And I just want to say, I think that was the most brilliant performance ever in the history of everything.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Big doings in Big D. The George W. Bush Presidential Library, Museum, and Institute has opened with elaborate fanfare. And what a piece of work it is. A $250 million, 226,000 square foot edifice on 15 acres. Never has something so large been built to contain something so small, namely the thoughts and record of achievements by this two-term president. His brick and limestone structure is certainly imposing, but once inside, you quickly see that it's a $250 million can of whitewash. Of course, all ex-presidents want libraries that show their good side, and Bush himself was organizer-in-chief of this monumental altar to himself. What's most striking is not what's in it, but what's not. For example, where's that Mission Accomplished banner that he used as a political prop in May 2003 when he strutted out so fatuously on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, wearing a flight suit to pretend like he had won the Iraq War? And how about a video loop of him finally showing up in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, cluelessly praising his infamously incompetent emergency management honcho with the now notorious shout-out, "Heck of a job, Brownie!" Also, while there are 35 featured videos, a replica of W's Oval Office, narrated presentations by top Bush officials, and even statues of the family dogs, where's Cheney? Shouldn't there be an animated exhibit of the Vice in his dark chamber, scheming to shred our Constitution and set up an imperial presidency? Another essential element of George's tenure that goes unportrayed here would be called the dead garden of compassionate conservatism. This is Jim Hightower saying, why spend $250 million when they could have said it all with a $25 a gallon can of whitewash?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Kenneth Paris, chief economist with the Communications Workers of America, says labor and environmental activists came away from the Blue-Green Alliance Good Jobs, Green Jobs conference in Washington last week with a strengthened understanding of the need to work together.
It's a coalition where environmentalists recognize that the rights of workers and decent paying jobs and to have the ability to choose whether to be a union member or not without fear is critical to improving the environment. And you have unions who have learned that improving the environment is critical on the job, in the community, for their families and for the globe, and that we have to work together to move forward where we have good jobs, green jobs.
Paris says America's infrastructure is decaying and much of it is antiquated. China has more efficient electric grids, losing far less power as it's transmitted. Paris says big investments in infrastructure would create good jobs while improving the environment and preparing the nation's infrastructure for the impact of climate change. He says the broken political process complicates progress, but the Blue-Green Alliance can help empower working progressives to fight effectively for change.
We need to form a broad progressive coalition, an alliance, a movement to empower citizens to be able to take part in the process, the political process, effectively.
23 striking Teamsters sanitation workers returned to work Monday at Republic Services landfill in Youngstown, Ohio. The union says the workers never wanted to strike, but the company's behavior left them no choice. There were national solidarity picket line extensions throughout the strike. The Teamsters say for them this strike was about the company, Republic Services Allied Waste, breaking the law. The Teamsters have suspended the unfair labor practices strike at Youngstown. Workers in Colorado are a step closer to receiving more protections when a company uses a defensive lockout in contract negotiations. Under Colorado law, workers are already authorized to receive unemployment benefits when a company engages in an offensive lockout. Such a lockout is used by companies to pressure workers to accept a contract. A defensive contract lockout is when a company locks out their workers as a repercussion for workers within the same industry striking against another company. Such a tactic was employed by grocery chains King Soopers and Safeway in 1996. The two grocers were in joint contract negotiations, so when workers at King Soopers struck, Safeway took a defensive posture and locked out its workers. A bill currently meandering through the Colorado legislature would extend unemployment benefits to workers being targeted in a defensive lockout. That bill is opposed by grocery chains and Republicans, but strongly supported by labor organizations and Democrats. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. SoFlo Radio, Progressive Blend Radio, RadioOrNot.com, or, of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM WPWC in Washington, D.C. Or thanks for checking out the podcast or the YouTube video or the new website or wherever you are joining us. There's too many things to plug now.
Why don't we not?
Okay. So...
chances are they're checking us out. They know where they're checking us out at this moment.
Well, thank you for being there.
Yes. We can keep the thank yous. How's that?
Yes. So, austerity. How about that for a segue?
Wow.
Screeching
you are a pro.
Many people are now familiar with the term austerity because it is being imposed throughout the world. It is wreaking havoc on the lives of millions of people in Europe, in the U.S., and pretty much just about everywhere. Well, this week we learned of Thomas Herndon, who essentially debunked the major study that's being used to push these austerity measures.
Yeah, he's a grad student at the University of
UMass.
Massachusetts Amherst.
Yes.
And they are publishing this now. I think he has since graduated. They're publishing the paper, essentially saying that your sample size was messed up. That perhaps, I don't know, going out on a limb here, you may have wanted a certain answer and therefore adjusted your data. Now, at first when we learned of this, oh, well, maybe they just, oops, we made a little mistake.
Right.
We made a mistake.
I am quite familiar with Excel. It is very easy to forget a cell when you're
You didn't carry the
calculating.
one.
Didn't round correctly.
It's not like it's an important paper. You have to double check your work or anything. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Right.
It was just a draft.
The paper Herndon disproved is now commonly known as the Reinhart-Rogoff study, and it is a 2010 paper called Growth in a Time of Debt. It essentially makes the claim that companies with high debt in relation to GDP experience... countries, with high debt to GDP experience slow or negative growth.
Right.
But
and Republicans go on and on. They've gone on for years on this debt battle. That the reason that we're having slow growth is because our debt is so high and it's going higher and higher, and Obama debt, blah 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 blah. That this reckless spending is the reason we have to cut it, because if we don't cut it, we'll never get our GDP growth.
Right.
So it's good for you in the middle class, to be screwed by the government, because I swear to God, it'll all trickle down eventually.
Right. Where have we heard that before?
The 80s.
Yes. But Herndon was asked as part of an economic project to recreate the analysis based on a major paper. So he solicited the data from Karen Reinhart, one of the study's authors. He had to email her quite often, and eventually he said he opened his email one day and it was sitting there, and so he started to look at the data. What he found quite quickly, he said, is that he clicked on cell L51. Anybody who works with Excel or has worked with Excel know boring terms like that. And it had only averaged rows 30 through 44 instead of rows 30 through 49. So 5 rows of data were omitted in the calculations.
Now, I would imagine these 5, just for some reason, they had to be excluded because they were not indicative of anything, and they were the outliers. No,
it
wasn't like the high-low score at the Olympics.
Nope. They just happened to include data from Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, all countries that had experienced strong growth rates despite having high levels of debt. So Thomas Herndon is not trying to say that this was intentionally done. He specifically...
No, we are.
Yeah, we are. Yes. He says that this could be an error. He asked several professors to double-check his work, making sure the error wasn't on his part. And essentially, once those other countries were included in the math, the whole proof that austerity was the solution was debunked. The data fell apart, showing that, in fact, countries can grow just fine with high levels of debt, and one has nothing to do with the other.
And that makes sense, especially the Keynesians.
Right.
That the money the government spends and doesn't collect in taxes and money that stays in the economy or is spent in the economy, and that leads to growth.
Right. So Herndon's work has now been talked about, been supported by, some major economists like Paul Krugman, really supported by people who have now had access to this data and re-verified the work that Thomas Herndon has done. And his work will be published along with 2 co-authors of professors at his university who helped him ensure that his calculations were correct. And you can look for it under the name, Does High Public Debt Consistently Stifle Economic Growth? A Critique of Reinhart and Rogoff. That second line is just my favorite.
Sure.
Yes. So this news got us asking the why. Was this an error? Was it a mistake? As you said, Shane, were these outliers?
Sure.
Why would...
You know what I'm talking about, the diving competition in the Olympics?
Right.
You get 5 scores, you get rid of the top and the bottom because they might be biased or whatever. You know, the Russians, they're always...
Yeah.
You know, and then you take the middle.
Right.
Which actually you're not supposed to do in statistics, but I was just using it as a joke. But it seems odd that only those that were contrary to the point that the paper proved were the ones omitted.
Right.
That seems like selective omission.
Especially given the given the level of prestige these two economists that wrote the paper have gotten before and since.
This has affected
the world.
Economic policy for the EU and to an extent here in the United States.
Right.
Certainly the political conversation.
Right. So in doing a little bit of digging, the Center for Media and Democracy figured out that Karen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff, the study's authors, have strong links to debt-obsessed billionaire Pete Peterson, who is... Yes, if you're not familiar with Pete Peterson, he has been advocating cuts to the social safety net for decades, likely to try and benefit off of potential privatization.
As an aside, can I just say Pete Peterson is a funny name?
Yes.
Because remember Jimmy James?
Yes.
The billionaire from talk radio or news radio, and Johnny Johnson. Anyone has the first name and then the first name is truncated to make their second name is obviously an evil billionaire. That's what it is.
We can possibly make that hypothesis.
Although I don't know about Tommy Thompson.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
See, there's your outlier. Anyhow.
That goes into L24 or whatever.
Pete Peterson is a billionaire. He has spent personally $500 million to promote this idea of austerity. $500 million with a B. So you have to wonder how much he stands to gain off of these cuts, off of this austerity policy. He's behind the AstroTurf organization Fix the Debt. He's
really?
Yes, he is.
Ah.
He is. He runs the Peterson Institute, which funded and bankrolled this entire pro-austerity study in the first place. So, in a matter of a week, we learned that the math on this study is bad. The study being used to really damage the lives of people throughout the world. And then we learned why. So it begs to question.
I don't know if we know why, but certainly the source indicates the why.
Yeah, we will say we think we know why.
Our opinion is that someone who has a lot to gain off of privatizing Social Security just might want these results and push for them.
Right.
Say, why don't you forget about those couple cells right there?
Right, those aren't important. Look over here.
Yeah. Oh, and here's the tip for great job. Here's a little extra money.
But this begs the question why Democrats in this country are even allowing the austerity discussion to continue. Why they aren't wringing their hands and beating down doors to reverse the austerity that's been imposed on our nation. Obviously, the math is bad. The science is bad. The calls for spending cuts, saying that we needed to do it because it was an emergency, were all bunk science.
Yeah, and even within the last few weeks, when asked, do we have a current budget crisis, even John Boehner, no, it's not immediate.
Right.
No. Well, then why are you doing this?
Right.
Well, because, the debt's going to kill us in the long... No, it's not. It's not.
Even in the EU, which is where some of the worst austerity measures throughout the world have been imposed, bringing, like, for instance, Spain's unemployment rate to 27.2%.
Which is worse than during the Great Depression.
Right.
We have the case study now, too.
Right.
We have evidence. Doesn't work. Let's stop it. And I think the EU is kind of flirting with the idea of...
backing off.
Yeah.
And according to the New York Times, even some of the most staunch supporters of austerity, notably German Chancellor Angela Merkel, are saying that, okay, maybe it's time to back off the austerity measures. Even the creators of some of these debt policies, like the International Monetary Fund, have acknowledged that they might, quote, move away from what critics see as a fixation on debt. So their side, the New York Times has referenced this paper, referenced Pete Peterson. We're not sure. We can't say if leaders in the EU have also gotten their hands on this now debunked study and seen the error of their ways. But it looks like even European countries are recognizing that they need to pursue different policies, that they need to start spending and investing in their nations and hopefully stimulate growth and turn some of this horrendous economic result around. Why aren't we doing that here?
Because the Republican argument that we'll become like Greece, while not based in fact, and why there are significant differences between the two, they point to Europe and say, this could become us. We're not doing that yet.
Right.
In other words, this is complicated stuff. And if you try to explain that to a regular, intelligent United States voter, they're able to grasp you have to balance your household budget over the difference between having fiat money and whether or not you have control over your currency and whether austerity and debt to GDP ratios and the paper by this guy was debunked by this blank, you know. So it's really, these are difficult concepts, and we've battled with them for hours trying to understand the reading. And so to be able to put them on bumper stickers, it's easier to point to that country and say they're a mess because,
Yes.
and then point it to it's because of their debt.
Well, and
so I don't think they're going to give up on this at all.
I also want to, say that Europe is moving away from them with a grain of salt, because Angela Merkel herself says that the EU shuns the word austerity, that austerity has been correlated with the fiscal struggle, the economic hardship that's being imposed on citizens in the EU. Well, they're only going to replace it with a new term called fiscal consolidation. I'm wondering if Frank Luntz has taken a visit to the EU.
Yeah. In other words, first of all, the people who have instituted austerity don't want to say, oh, oops, we're wrong.
Right.
And Angela Merkel has a heck of a lot of power because of austerity.
Right.
Do you really think she's going to relinquish Germany's, really high tier, if not top tier position economically in the EU? They can influence that entire sphere with their insistence on this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
People who have power, countries that have power, don't want to relinquish it. And to say we were wrong and go ahead and spend like you want, they would lose the power and they would lose their positions, their jobs. It would fix everything probably, or at least make things significantly better for the citizens.
It would put those nations on the right path.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, putting this warning out there, this term, fiscal consolidation, because I would bet quite strongly that we will hear this term from Republicans here at home. Just keep an eye out for it.
Is that what they did with the F.A.A.?
We're going to get into that next.
Yeah.
Maybe the fiscal consolidation didn't work out so well when it affected Congress members. We're going to talk about that next. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Austerity's been debunked. Even more coming up next on Talking Left, so don't go anywhere.
It reflects the drama of the human experience, and isn't that the essence of art?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping big brothers, big sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So we just talked about austerity. One of the ways that that's been imposed in this nation is through this sequester, which has been an across-the-board budget cut for government agencies, services, programs.
Kind of across the board.
Kind of across the board. Well, it was across the board until Congress themselves were inconvenienced by it. At least that's my theory.
Some of their more influential constituents, which is a problem in and of itself.
Yes.
That certain constituents are more influential than others.
Yes.
The ones that tend to fly on planes.
This week, the Senate and the House approved legislation to reverse the furloughs taking place in the F.A.A., the Federal Aviation Administration. Air traffic controllers, some 15,000, were being furloughed, causing delays at airports.
And at first the Republicans, this is not necessary.
Right.
This is just unnecessary. To make a political point, some of the arguments out there was, air traffic has gone down 20-some%, and the FAA budget's gone up 110%.
Right.
Which I think is a bunch of BS. Just because there's not as many planes in the sky, there's still as much sky that you have to monitor.
Yes.
It's kind of like saying
until you start closing airports.
And if somehow our airspace shrinks, it's like saying we have 10% less cars on the road, so we can get rid of 10% of the street lights. No, if you get rid of 10% of the roads, you can get rid of 10% of the streetlights.
Right.
It's just a ridiculous analogy. And what they're essentially trying to say is use really simple numbers to say Obama's doing this on purpose.
Right. Any excuse to blame Obama.
But 70-some% of the F.A.A. budget are those salaries.
Right.
And if you have to cut a certain amount, you're going to cut as much as you can of the non-salaried, but at some point
It's got to come from somewhere.
You can't say, oh, you're taking a cut in wages. That's just not, so they said, well, we're going to have to impose it. You're going to have to work less hours because we can't pay you for those hours.
Right.
So, and we have to maintain the safety of the skies. This is what austerity means. This is what it means. There are lots of people out there that understand exactly what it means right now. It's just they're not on airplanes.
Right.
They're trying to find food or trying to get their kids a Head Start or trying to find housing. The basic necessities. But they don't worry about the basic necessities. They worry about whether or not they're going to get back to their district on time and not have a flight delay.
Precisely.
Or their constituents, the important ones at least.
Right. So many legislators on both sides of the aisle supported this legislation to stop the furloughs. That's 15,000 people who now don't have to, be told they can't work in what. Right.
It's fantastic for the workers. They're going to get a full paycheck.
Right. But one legislator, specifically, our legislator, Steny Hoyer, stood up and gave one heck of a speech as to why he voted no to this bill. And we thought you should hear it.
I will oppose this bill because it fails to address the whole impact of sequester. Let me share just a handful of examples of how the sequester will affect Americans. Education, Head Start, 70,000 children will be kicked out of Head Start. Nothing in this bill deals with them. Furloughs to cause delays in processing retirement for disability claims. Nothing in this bill deals with them. 4 million fewer Meals on Wheels for seniors. 600,000 people dropped off WIC. Nothing in here for them. Housing, 125,000 less HUD rental assistance vouchers. Nothing in here for them. Unemployment insurance, emergency unemployment insurance, cut 11% for 2 million out-of-work Americans. Nothing in here for them. FDA, 2,100 fewer food safety inspections, an 18% cut. Nothing in here for them. Longer waits to approve new drugs. Nothing in here for them. Defense and Homeland Security furloughs equivalent to 1,000 fewer federal agents, FBI, border, etc. on the job. 1/3 of combat air units are grounded. Nothing in here for them. 89,000 agency-wide furloughs in IRS up to 7 days, including, may I have 30 additional seconds?
You have 30 additional seconds.
Including taxpayer assistance centers. Nothing in here for them. They serve 89,000 taxpayers trying to find help. We ought not to be mitigating the sequester's effect on just one segment. When children, the sick, our military, and many other groups who will be impacted by this irresponsible policy are left unhelped. Instead of dressing this serious wound with a small Band-Aid, let's get to work on a real solution. Let's go to conference. Let's get a big deal.
Amen, Steny Hoyer. That was awesome. Even Jay Carney said that this bill is, quote, no more than a temporary Band-Aid that fails to address the overreaching threat to our economy posed by the sequester's mindless across-the-board cuts. And Steny Hoyer and Jay Carney are right. And we now know that those spending cuts are the result of debunked science pushed by Pete Peterson. So when is it that Congress is going to stand up and put an end to this nonsense? Hopefully soon. We'll be right back here on Talking Left. Stick around.
It's Tuesday, April 23, 2013.
The explosion and fire aboard the Deepwater Horizon and the resulting oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico never should have happened. And I'm deeply sorry that it did.
The third anniversary of BP's oil disaster in the Gulf. EPA victory over mountaintop removal coal mining. Then EPA slams State Department over Keystone XL. Plus,
And I told him flat out, my intention is to disrupt this auction in any way that I can.
after 2 years in prison, environmental activist Tim DeChristopher is freed on Earth Day.
All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The 43rd annual Earth Day. At that age, no wonder its ice caps are receding.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, hope you had a pleasant Earth Day this week.
Indeed.
I want to take a quick moment to remember Stephen F. Hayward in the Weekly Standard. On April 16, 2010, he wrote, "To fear oil spills from offshore rigs today is analogous to fearing air travel now because of prop plane crashes in the 1950s. Of course, just 4 days later, on April 20, the Deepwater Horizon exploded in the Gulf, killing 11 men and kicking off the world's worst accidental oil spill. Here's to you, Stephen Hayward.
Wow.
Sorry you never decided it was worthwhile to apologize, grovel, and disappear."
Wow, that's pretty stunning.
And he continues to write such a right-wing denialism still in the Weekly Standard, which apparently has no standards at all. What do you have for us today, Desi Doyen?
Well, more on the BP anniversary in a moment. But first, on the Keystone XL pipeline, over 1 million public comments were posted during the official public comment period on the State Department's widely panned draft environmental impact statement on the controversial pipeline. But not before the Environmental Protection Agency weighed in, issuing a sharply critical assessment, calling the State Department's report, quote, insufficient and underestimating the climate impacts if the pipeline were built and the potential impacts of pipeline spills on drinking water supplies.
Good for the EPA.
It's kind of a big deal. The EPA also won a major court victory on Tuesday against the coal industry. A federal appeals court on Tuesday ruled that the EPA does have the authority to veto permits issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers allowing mountaintop removal coal mines if the EPA determines the mine would violate the Clean Water Act. And those were 3 Republican-appointed federal judges.
Good for the EPA. I'm glad to see they're stepping up.
Environmental activist Tim DeChristopher is now free, released after nearly 2 years in prison for preventing a federal lease sale back in 2008 that would have allowed oil and gas drilling next to national parks in Utah. The entire lease sale was later declared illegal, but DeChristopher was prosecuted anyway by the Obama administration. There are serious major problems with his prosecution and trial, detailed in the new documentary film called Bitter 70.
I interviewed Tim DeChristopher in early 2011, just before he was set to go to jail, and I asked him if, at the time he placed these fake bids for public lands, if he truly understood the consequences that he might be facing.
I was thinking, if I do this, I'll go to prison for a couple of years, and that would certainly suck pretty bad, but it's something I could live with. But on the other hand, if I turn my back on this opportunity, knowing that I had there's some opportunity right there in front of me to do something about it, and I didn't take it, I couldn't live with that weight on my conscience.
Good for Tim DeChristopher. He's an American hero, and I got to tell you, we just saw a similar story where the Obama administration was found guilty of violating the law in these land leases for oil fracking in California. Good to see Americans stepping up. Too bad they have to pay such a price for doing the right thing.
Finally, remember this?
We're sorry for the massive disruption it's caused to their lives. And, there's no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I'd like my life back.
Former BP CEO wishing he had his life back. Never mind those 11 men in the Gulf who were killed.
Yep, it was the worst accidental offshore oil spill in world history. The 3rd anniversary of the BP oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico occurred on Earth Day when the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig sank to the bottom of the ocean 2 days after that explosion that killed 11 men. The well gushed 206 million gallons of crude oil. The Gulf is still seeing tar balls and oil wash on shore. And an ongoing BP trial in New Orleans is now determining whether BP acted with gross negligence or just regular negligence leading up to the disaster. Florida has filed a separate lawsuit against BP and cement contractor Halliburton. And now new uncovered documents reveal BP withheld information on the toxic effects of the oil spill cleanup chemical Corexit and its effect on people and animals. Many Gulf Coast residents still don't have their lives back.
No, they don't. And while no one from BP may ever go to jail, may ever see real justice, I suppose there is actually some justice in the fact that every Earth Day from now on, we'll be remembering the BP oil spill as it coincides each and every year.
Yep.
For more on that story and all of the other ones that we covered today, please check our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Please find us and like us on the Facebook and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. For bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
I'm sorry, so sorry that
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So, the big news throughout the week before was Boston.
Yes. And a particular issue that we brought up last week said, look out for this one.
Yes, and
you might be hearing about it.
Boy, did you call that one, Shano.
Wasn't a difficult call.
Yes. The big hubbub over on the right, and even by some on the left, is whether or not Dzhokhar Tsarneav deserved the reading of his Miranda rights. And Shane, that prompted you to explain to me things I didn't realize I didn't know. I have a reasonable grasp on the Constitution. I have a reasonable grasp on what our constitutionally protected rights are.
And you've probably watched a bunch of cop shows, too, that have kind of blown up what really is going on out there.
Right. And so I continue, and I still do, just for commonality, use the term Miranda rights. But that's not exactly correct, right?
Miranda rights actually is a correct term.
Okay.
But the understanding of what a Miranda right is what's kind of messed up. Miranda, the reading of those rights is not a right in of itself. Miranda rights refers to constitutional rights, the actual rights that Miranda says. But those were not created
by Miranda.
Now, first of all, we should probably say where Miranda came from.
Yes.
Miranda is not in the Constitution. Doesn't exist. Miranda was actually a defendant in a criminal case back in the 60s. I think it's Arizona. Miranda has been commonly, because of that decision, has been commonly known as the rights that the government has to read to you. But those rights are in the 5th and 6th Amendments to our Constitution. They've always been there since the enactment of the Bill of Rights. So Miranda did not create new rights. It created a new rule, a new evidentiary rule. All right? So your rights are, you have the right to remain silent. That's in the 5th Amendment. You cannot be forced to testify against yourself.
Right.
The next one, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. In other words, self-incriminate, meaning those words can be used against you. That would be self-incrimination. You have the right to an attorney. That's in the 6th Amendment. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, meaning that right to an attorney is not blocked off by the fact
financial
capabilities. So those rights have always been there.
And Miranda
arguably the state providing an attorney happened later.
And Miranda is really just reaffirming, informing you of those rights that you have under the Constitution.
And more importantly, what that case said is if you don't, the information that you elicit from that suspect will be inadmissible in court. So in other words, you police, if you don't read the Miranda warning to inform of these 5th and 6th Amendment rights, anything that suspect says, the person who's been detained and is being questioned, if you're going to prosecute that person, the information you've elicited will not come in court. And it's essentially an evidentiary rule to force police to inform people of their rights because they were abusing this in the past, saying, oh, you can talk, or, no, you can't have a lawyer. Essentially because cops are allowed to lie. If that lie would I can't remember the name of the wording of it, would not implicate someone who was otherwise innocent or something like that. So in terms, Miranda was created by the courts. And then decades later, the courts carved out an exception to their rule. Meaning, and it said that you don't have to read the warning if you're asking questions about some kind of imminent threat. The case was Quarles.
Hence called the public safety exception that was used by the FBI in the case of Dzhokhar Tsarneav.
Right. It was a 1984 case, I believe. Quarles, New York v. Quarles, or Quarles v. New York. Guy who was had held up a store. He had used a gun. They found him. He didn't have the gun. He had a holster on. They were worried that the gun was in a place that could hurt other people.
Right.
So they asked him, "Where's the gun?" before saying all the Miranda rights. He said, "Here's the gun," because they wanted to keep the public safe. What he said about where the gun was admissible because they had to ask that question. They know that when you read the Miranda warnings, it's more likely that someone's going to say, "I'm not going to talk. I want my lawyer." And that really frustrates police. I understand that. But we have a constitution.
That's the headline that came out in response to Dzhokhar Tsarneav being read his rights. We saw that exact headline. After being read rights, Tsarneav clams up. Right. Well, number one, Shane, and you and I have probably read equal amounts about this case. It appeared that he had already incriminated himself. Number two, it wasn't just that he was read his rights. There's another aspect there, is there not?
He has an attorney now.
He has an attorney.
And that attorney may advise, just be quiet now.
Right.
The thing is that you don't ever have to read Miranda. You're not required. There's not some law that says you must read Miranda. It's just that all the information you get is not admissible. So the government, and by the way, there's going to be a hearing about this. It's not like this rule is, some kind of bright line. What'll happen is if they want to use those statements that he made before the Miranda reading, they're going to go into court, and the defense attorney, if this goes all the way to trial, et cetera, barring pleas and things like that, is going to say that's not admissible. He wasn't read his Miranda rights, and then the prosecution will say we are going to argue the public safety exception, and the court will hear this. They will hear this. They will balance it. They will decide whether or not the Supreme Court precedent fits this case. If it does, then it'll be admissible. If it doesn't, then it won't. It may be appealed. These things, they happen. They don't happen in a vacuum. And they're very important because we, one, want to uphold our Constitution, but two, we want to keep our Constitution is for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to achieve those goals in the Declaration of Independence. And there are situations, especially this guy still had his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. He just wasn't read them.
So what do you say? Because there's lots of people who are in the middle on this issue, but there are two sides somewhat forming. One saying he should have been treated like an enemy combatant and denied any of his constitutional rights.
He's a United States citizen.
And there are also some saying that they shouldn't have even used the public safety exception, that he should have been read his rights right away, and that any failure to do that was defying the Constitution. What is the legal reality in between those 2 points?
Well, the legal reality is what the Supreme Court said in 1984.
Which is there is an exception.
There is an exception. If you're going to talk in strict constitutional terms, they did not chip away at the Constitution.
He still has
Miranda is there to
Sixth.
protect the Constitution, and they did take away part of that protection, but the Constitution was still there. The rights were still there. They just weren't read to him, and that is a court-made-up rule. Now, I like it. I don't like police who bully people and deny, because the antithesis, of course, is where they say, "Oh no, you can't have an attorney. No, you have to talk to us."
And that had happened previously.
Sure.
It had happened.
And we don't want that happening. But at the same time, we've been arguing here with the Second Amendment that it is not absolute. We've argued with the First Amendment. It is not absolute. And we, the people, ourselves, we need to decide what those exceptions are, where those lines are, how. And I understand Benjamin Franklin said, those who would sacrifice a little bit of liberty for a little bit of safety will deserve neither, or will have neither. But that's just not the way it works.
Well, and couldn't that argument be used against people who are advocating for gun control? We want gun control because we want safety.
Sure. But what I'm saying, what we're talking about is balancing against public safety.
Right.
The rights in the Bill of Rights saying, all right, we are not going to give an inch on the Fifth or Sixth Amendments for public safety because that would destroy our Constitution. Well, then you can say, the gun rights people can say, we're not going to give an inch on the Second Amendment for public safety either.
And Nazi groups and First and Westboro Baptist Church members can say we're not going to give an inch on the First Amendment.
Or people who like looking at child pornography.
Oh,
or
good
sick,
God, yes.
Because that protects children. There are all kinds of ways in which or people in a theater, they have the right to have someone not scream fire and have them trampled to death. there are limits. Now, defining those limits can be difficult, and that's why we have these conversations. Why I'm glad there are people on the opposite side, so we can come to an agreement. Unfortunately, that agreement is usually reached by 9 kings and queens that are just down the street from here,
and
it's hard to trust them.
9 kings and queens who tend to rule in favor of.
Well, I wouldn't say. I don't know because the court just recently said you need a warrant to draw blood.
That's true.
You can't search a house. You can't bring a drug sniffing dog up to a house and then get probable cause in order to do a search, because of the curtilage. So, I wouldn't say they're going to rule one way or the other, or that they're even going to get this case, because it's widely held, and I don't know for a fact because we don't have law enforcement sources, but that there was plenty of evidence if conviction was the goal, they probably are not worried about that. They were worried about protecting the public.
Right. If what we know from the media is correct, they have plenty of evidence in this case.
But, there are lots of reasons that we prosecute people. One is to punish, but we also do it to protect the public, that they can't do it again, to dissuade others from doing it. So if one of your goals is to protect the public, if there's an ongoing threat, asking those questions is not only legal, we want it. I want them to ask those questions. I want to know if there's another bomb out there that's ticking.
Yeah,
I think those are reasonable questions.
I have to agree with you, and I just say to those out there that are so concerned about the destruction of constitutional rights here, that be careful what arguments you use, and I've personally fallen into this trap.
But one important thing,
because it will be turned against you in the gun argument.
Right, but there's an important part of this that I hope that there is some kind of, we the people, we get to decide what those rules are, and our judges and justices determine that. But the only way to be able to determine where that line is, and in particular this case, is if we know what questions were asked beforehand. There needs to be some transparency. We need to look at this case, what questions were asked before Miranda, what information was elicited. Even if a judge just looks at it, I would feel more comfortable.
Me too.
Just to say, do what you want. Because we're scared, do whatever you want. That's not what I'm advocating.
That's when we're getting into the gravity of the Ben Franklin quote that you just stated.
So, trust but verify. And I think that there should be some judicial oversight at the very least of what occurred. Was the Constitution protected? Was the public's protected, and was the correct balance struck in this case?
And despite what people may think of him, was the suspect protected as well? Because it could be any one of us sitting in that chair, maybe not for a crime so heinous, but for something that we're asking for those same rights to be protected and upheld for us too. Shane, thank you for clearing that up.
I don't know if I cleared it up much. But.
Well, it's about as clear as mud, and you at least sorted it out a bit for me personally. Hopefully for our listeners as well. We have got lots more in store on today's show. Still have Matthew Filipovich, David Bender, and Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival all coming up in the next few segments. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Confound it. You're right. It's brilliant.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
This is Kimon Freeman, host of Speak Easy and co-founder of We Act Radio. Suicide is a very serious problem in today's challenging world, whether with our troops abroad or with everyday citizens within our own society. Before you take your life into your own hands, tie a knot at the end of your rope and call the suicide hotline toll-free at 1-855-320-LIFE. That's 1-855-320-LIFE. It may just be the most important call you ever make. You talk, we listen, and together we survive.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Hi, I'm Tom Morello. Some call me the Night Watchman. In the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal's at a crucial stage, please go to freemumia.com to find out more information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We were just speaking about the Miranda Rights and how they're involved with the Boston bombing case. We've seen so much reaction to the Boston bombing, so much great, emotional, passionate response from right at moments, after the event and people running toward the blast to help one another. We've seen huge outpourings of donations to help the victims afford the medical care. Even the hospitals and insurance companies have come out and said that they will help make it affordable for these people to get care, the victims of the blast. We've also seen right-wing reaction that has ranged from everything from insulting anti-Islam comments all the way to hysteria and manufactured crisis, such as Alex Jones saying that the whole event was a false flag operation that was really conducted by the U.S. government. And he's not alone. Glenn Beck has his own conspiracy theory that the Saudi national that was originally blamed for the attack is the real bomber, and Michelle Obama is secretly getting him out of the country to protect him. Really?
Well, remember, these two people that we're speaking of here, they have a lot of moolah to make from this.
Yes, they do.
And thinking about that, I was thinking back to the 80s and the 90s and the televangelists. Remember them?
Yes.
Put your faith in me and the Word of God and everything that you're afraid of in life, I will deliver you from, and make sure that you send in my your Social Security check and watch my TV show, and think of the movie, the Steve Martin movie, Leap of Faith.
Right.
The people that they are capitalizing on fear. And I don't want to. I'm not going to degrade religion, but there are many parts of religion that are there to grant redemption for fear of death.
Right. You're not speaking of religion.
No.
You're speaking of people who manipulate religious.
Right. And manipulate their fears.
Right.
And say, I am the truth. Only trust me. Everyone who doesn't believe this, they're the outsiders. Do not trust them. They are the heathens. They are the non-believers. Put faith in me, and I will protect you. It reminds me so much of they're conservangelists.
Right, especially Glenn Beck. I mean, look at Glenn Beck. He's selling these survival kits.
Right.
He's selling...
And buy some gold.
Buy some gold. Buy my survival kit while I'll tell you about how Obama's going to end the world.
Right, and take your guns and
Right.
and be scared of these people.
And all of these insane theories he just uses to support his own nonsense and to get his listeners, his viewers, to buy more stuff.
And what's more frightening, though, is that his listeners are now members of Congress.
Yes.
That they are part of the flock of the Church of Glenn Beck.
Yes, Rachel Maddow did a great piece on this about how theories that originated with Beck and Alex Jones have made their way into Congress, and we will not try and get into the detail that she did because she's Maddow. But there really is that similarity, Shane, between these two individuals and the televangelists, especially in how their followers react.
Sure.
Any presentation of fact, any presentation of logic is simply evidence of the conspiracy in their mind.
Exactly. Just as if, some evangelists tend to pick their truth texts out of the Bible.
Right.
These are the proof texts, I should say. These ones prove what I'm saying. I'm going to ignore the rest. You have some of these conservangelists who are saying, this fact right here backs me. Ignore all the other ones. I'll fill it in for you because you trust me and I'm the one who's going to keep you safe.
Right.
Only trust me. The rest of them, they are the liberal media who are going to hurt you. They're going to make you dependent. They're going to take away your freedom. You are going to be in a living hell because you're going to lose everything. Everything.
Right.
And you're going to be overrun by those people that you should be afraid of and are the reason you have this lousy lot in life. I am the true salvation.
Although, I have to say there's one more coincidence that I think applies not just to the evangelists and specifically your Steve Martin reference and these two gentlemen. Neither of them, like Steve Martin in the movie Leap of Faith, believe the nonsense that they're selling. I really don't believe it. I think it's just to sell more podcasts, to sell more gold.
But, there's the psychopathological leaders of these things, and then there's the entrepreneurial. We have to figure out if they're both, neither, one or the other, or we don't have to decide it all. You can make your own conclusions, because you can have your opinion, too.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about this more and talk about some of these extreme reactions with Matthew Filipovich, host of the Matthew Filipovich Show. He does a great job over there. We're going to get his opinion here on Talking Left. Talking Left coming up next.
Holy crap! We'll have more on these new developments after this.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
After 11 years of war, $664 billion expended so far, 2,210 Americans dead, more than 35,000 of our troops maimed and shattered, and our good reputation spent. What have we built in Afghanistan? According to a top international law enforcement official, you and I have built the world's first true narco state. Congratulations! The opium trade, he added, is a much bigger part of the Afghan economy already than narcotics ever were in Bolivia or Colombia. You might recall that under both George W.'s and Obama's war strategies, eliminating Afghanistan's poppy production was one of America's chief goals, for that crop generated billions of dollars in annual income for the Taliban insurgency, even as it fueled drug addiction here and around the world. So, to combat the drug trade, the U.S. has 1. Destroyed thousands of acres of opium poppies, 2. Tried to shift the country's impoverished farmers to wheat and other alternative crops, and 3. Paid million-dollar Good Performers Awards to provinces that achieved the coveted poppy-free status. So, mission accomplished? The numbers tell the tale. For the third year in a row, Afghanistan's poppy cultivation has increased. Acreage devoted to poppies this year is expected to set a record. Only one province has reduced its poppy plantings this spring. 12 have increased theirs. Finally, this stat. Afghanistan is expected to produce 90% of the world's opium, plus 75% of the heroin supply. This is Jim Hightower saying, wait, one more telltale stat. An Afghan farmer can get 43 cents a kilogram for wheat, or $203 a kilogram for poppies. Which would you choose? Our war in Afghanistan makes no sense whatsoever.
Why are we there? If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Hundreds of building trades union leaders and members in Washington for the Building Trades 2013 National Legislative Conference will rally today in support of the Keystone XL pipeline project. The building trades unions say they want a renewed focus and energy on America's continuing jobs crisis, and they say that effort can begin by approving the Keystone XL pipeline. Utility Workers President Michael Langford says America could create a serious 21st century greening of our economy through smart, substantial investments in infrastructure upgrades and replacement.
We lose methane gas from natural gas from leaking pipes into the air, which equates to 120 million automobiles. And the electrical grid voltage and line loss alone is phenomenal. And so just by improving all these, to me, will help green the economy, but also help our members because, I mean, these are all good-paying jobs, and not only our members, but building trades and others.
Langford says the U.S. is falling behind other nations in the quality and condition of our infrastructure, and he says rebuilding U.S. infrastructure using state-of-the-art green technology to cope with the impact of climate change is essential. But he says it's being held back by Wall Street's profits obsession.
Post-Sandy, it's crazy to go back up there and rebuild a system just like it was. So it's a system, the electric, we're working off a 19th century system. We need to upgrade it, and there's ways to upgrade it. There's been technological advancements that Europe and Asia's using. We're just not doing it because it's all about Wall Street and profits.
More than 100 striking yellow checker star transportation taxi drivers took a bus from Las Vegas to a demonstration at the state capitol at Carson City, Nevada, Tuesday. The taxi drivers were there to demonstrate against the Assembly's failure to bring Assembly Bill 329 to a vote. That bill would prohibit long hauling, running up the meter on passengers by traveling longer than necessary. The striking Las Vegas taxi drivers are members of ITPEU, OPEIU. More than 700 drivers have been on strike against Yellow Checker Star since March 3rd. Issues include wages and compensation and long hours with no overtime pay. Many drivers were making below minimum wage until a complaint was filed and a settlement was reached requiring Yellow Checker Star to pay more than $387,000 in back wages. The union also alleges unfair labor practices by Yellow Checker Star. Union workers united with other concerned Boston citizens to protect the funeral service of a Boston Marathon victim from a small Kansas religious cult known for shocking and offensive funeral protests. The Teamsters said their members and others served as human shields at the funeral of Crystal Campbell on Monday. The hate group didn't show up. Sean O'Brien, president of Teamsters Local 25, says he's committed to making certain that loved ones of the bombing victims can grieve in peace. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent, 1 in 260,000. The odds of him having 15 career NASCAR victories, 1 in 1.7 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left. We are very happy to be joined by our next guest. We're speaking with Matthew Filipovich, host of the Matthew Filipovich Show. You can check it out at matthewf.net. And, of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Matthew Filipovich. We will put that link up at talkingleft.com so you don't have to guess how to spell it. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have been doing a really great job covering the response to the Boston bombing, Boston Marathon bombing. I saw you spoke with someone from the ACLU of Massachusetts about the Miranda Rights issue, and I was curious on your take of the whole response to Boston, both from, the generous outpouring of time and money and support, as well as the right-wing freak-out reaction, basically saying that we should just go back to Islamophobia.
Right. Well, I mean, it's important to think about how, let's just draw the obvious connection to our last major terror attack, 9/11. So on 9/11, we were attacked by people primarily from Saudi Arabia, and then George W. Bush invaded Iraq. We were attacked in Boston by a couple of bros, essentially, these white dudes from Chechnya, and I think on a positive side, I think we can probably assume that Obama is probably not going to go and invade, Turkey or something like that, right? So that's a plus. But, however, after 9/11, we had all types of horrible things. Obviously, we had the Patriot Act, we had FISA, we had warrantless wiretapping. The list goes on and on and on. And I automatically do see that kind of fear ratcheting up, and not so much, not only just the fear, because it was definitely a scary event. I mean, I live in Boston. It was certainly not a fun week or so that went down here. But you kind of do see that automatically see people who are pretty much ready to try to exploit that fear for their own gain. See that gain, it might be money, it might be power. Let me give you an example. So our police commissioner here in Boston, a guy named Ed Davis, has already said that he would like to see drones flying over Boston for next year's marathon. Automatically, that's the first response. And it's not just happening here in Boston. Like, I don't know, you probably saw in New York, friggin' Mayor Bloomberg. I'm going to read a couple quotes from you guys, if that's okay. Mayor Bloomberg actually said this, which is just creepy as all hell. He actually said, quote, "You're never going to know where all our cameras are, and that's just one of the ways you deter people. They just don't know whether the person sitting next to them is someone sitting there or a detective watching." I mean, pretty much Mayor Bloomberg, the mayor of the largest city in the United States, is bragging about how he wants New York City to be like, 1984, the novel, essentially. Yeah. Ray Kelly, the police commissioner of New York City, also said just in this last week, he said literally, to quote, "The privacy issue has been taken off the table." And I have to say, who the hell is he to just automatically declare that? Just one police commissioner of one city in the United States just gets to declare, "Oh, you know what? Privacy's off the table. You got to get used to the cameras. You got to get used to the drones." I mean, this is also we're talking about New York. You're talking about the same police force that does racist, illegal stop and frisk. They're the ones who did the shameful spying on Muslims that was very well documented. It's really just sickening how these people are just so primed and ready to pounce on a horrible event for their own personal and political gain.
Yes, you see that from legislators all over the country, especially connecting this Boston attack to the upcoming immigration legislation, and people saying that, using this as an example of why we shouldn't allow legal immigration, even some going as far as saying the birthright citizenship privilege should be removed for Muslim Americans. What's your take on that?
Obviously, it's racist and ridiculous and flatly horrible. I think when you look at all the people like, your John McCain's, your Lindsey Graham's, who are, wanting to even declare the second bomber an enemy combatant, they're saying they don't want to Mirandize them. And sadly, it looks like he went 16 hours without having his rights read to him, which is, a travesty. The second bomber, allegedly, horrible human being. But, think about this is America. We're supposed to, you are guilty until you are proven you're innocent until proven guilty. Sorry, I actually got that backed up, thinking in the right-wing mindset that you're guilty before you're charged here. But it really is just it's a shame that this is happening in our country. And it's one of these things where, the thing that bothers me the most about this is the fact that so much of this is actually happening in secret. You know what I'm saying? It's like just this whole idea of of, okay, we have to take all these extra measures for security. You have to do all these extra things. A lot of this is actually not even happening in an open democratic process. I mean, so much of even what happened, all the insane security measures that happened post 9/11, all of that has happened secretly, essentially. I mean, this wasn't like legislation passed that allowed these, surveillance state, these fusion centers that we created all around the country. This is something that just essentially, these entities decided to put these things in place. And again, a lot of them are, profiting off it. I mean, I think it's just like, I think the L.A. Times reported it was something around $9.6 billion a year was spent on surveillance in 2010. And right now, even before the attacks that happened in Boston, it's actually forecast to go to $20.5 billion by 2016. There's a lot of money at stake here. And I think, like anything, you really should follow the money.
Yeah. You use the term exploit fear for money and power. We were speaking before the break, before we got you on the show, about the likes of the conspiracy theorists, Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, the really far out there. And I would say that your term, exploit fear for money and power, applies to them as well, that's essentially the only reason why they're putting out this type of absurd rhetoric. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about someone like Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, you're obviously talking about kind of the worst of the worst. And again, so clearly, I'm not going to defend those two at all because they don't deserve any type of defense in any way, shape, or form. However, I will say that sadly, just the way this was covered by the media, just the way that the whole entire attack was covered, where you had, literally. It's the age of Twitter, it's the age of 24-hour news, where we had so much information being thrown out quickly, and by the time we actually know, and we still don't honestly know really what went down on a lot of these, be it the bomb, be it at the day Thursday night when they allegedly carjacked the person, all the way to the shootout. And initially they said there was a rifle and multiple guns at the shootout, and then the police are now saying they had one gun. They initially said that the second bomber had a gun in the boat, and now they're saying, no, he didn't have a gun in the boat. And I think the way that our media kind of needs this instant gratification and this speculation, one, it's dangerous for society because that also feeds into the fear machine that we were talking about here. But I think that the way some of the stuff comes out actually lends some credence and gives these crazy evil people like Alex Jones or Glenn Beck an opening, just the way these things, the information actually comes out, because some of it actually you find out what you actually thought was true actually isn't true, and that unfortunately gives an opening to crazy people like Alex Jones and Glenn Beck to exploit it, again, for their own personal gain.
Exactly. What do you think of those specifically in Congress are already calling saying that this is President Obama's fault, especially on the Sunday morning talk shows, saying that he is somehow responsible. And I'm not connecting this with the radical theories of Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, who are saying, that they are literally responsible, but indirectly so. People saying that his terror policies, his defense policies are responsible for the loss of lives and the injuries in Boston. Do you think that theory is going to go anywhere, or is that just going to be seen as the ridiculous talking point that it is?
I don't know if I would necessarily say that our supposed, quote, counterterrorism policies is that this potentially might be blowback is ridiculous. Again, we don't really know what the motivations of these two bombers are. I would say and caution that the idea. I mean, I don't personally blame Obama, obviously, for the attack. However, what I would say is that our drone wars, our policies overseas, our bombings of weddings, our bombings of these things happen. These things, and they do have blowback and they do have consequences. However, it's also this idea, like, if someone is, and I think that's actually something to actually look at. What actually radicalized these two young men to the point where they were, willing and, able to do this gruesome, violent act against innocent people. Well, and I think actually having that real conversation, because the truth is, we're never really going to be able to stop someone who is at that point and is willing to go and do this ultimate act that's going to, potentially kill, hundreds of people, even though thankfully only 3 died, in Boston. However, and then the fourth with the officer, obviously. But, we're never actually going to be able to stop someone who is at that point. There is no real security. I mean, there's no surveillance camera that's going to stop these bombers from doing what they did. However, can we look at the kind of the bigger, again, I'm a lefty, the kind of hippie picture. Why are these people actually doing this? What are our policies that perhaps led them to this? They've said that, there was a quote, and again, I take this quote with a grain of salt because so much of the media that's come out has been proven false. But there was a quote from the second alleged bomber who said it was a response to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That, again, whether or not that's true, and obviously what they actually did, there is no justification for attacking civilians. But, there is blowback for our overseas policy. So I wouldn't say that having that discussion is a bad thing.
Right, and it's really interesting that you took that out of the question because I guess that was really narrow-mindedness on my part because I was thinking of the right-wing reaction that saying Obama's policies aren't strong enough on terror, aren't harsh enough against people like these, and they're blaming him in that respect. And where I do agree that the continuation of Bush policies and even the ramping up in some cases of these so-called national security policies are more likely to have played a role in this than him being so-called weak on terror, so-called leading from behind. As usual, Matthew, you are insightful and brilliant, and we always love speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
Matthew Filipovich, host of The Matthew Filipovich Show. If you haven't checked it out, you are seriously missing out on a great program.
Creatively named Matthew Filipovich Show, as he says.
He is a genius. So you can check it out at MatthewF.net. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Filipovich, Filippovicz, and we'll put that link up after the show.
The website's a lot easier.
Yes, MatthewF.net. But it really is a great show. You can catch it as well on We Act Radio, where you hear Talking Left. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we will be back with more. Stick around.
I'm David Schuster of Take Action News, and you're listening to my favorite show other than my own, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
We got no plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending.
This is your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. Whenever you have a scary-ass event like the Boston bombing or 9/11 or that guy who ate that other guy's face off, or when a dog riding a horse won America's Got Talent, meaning the most talented person in these 50 United States is a dog riding a horse. Can't wait to see who will win this time. Maybe there'll be an armadillo eating a corn on the cob. Whenever a traumatic event like these happens, there are several predictable human responses. One is fear. Another is to thank everyone in a uniform for their impressive service to the community, whether it be a police officer or the dude who watches the public pool to make sure no fat kids get clogged in the water slide. Yeah, go ahead. Give that police officer a hug, even though last week you voted for the representative who promised to break his union and take away his health care. And yet another predictable response is irrationality. We stop thinking about what makes sense and start thinking about what gives us a warm and fuzzy feeling. I imagine in the moment, militarizing Boston to the gills gave people a warm and fuzzy feeling. The quote-unquote good guys had giant guns and tanks rolling through the suburbs in order to defeat the 19-year-old Simon Bar Sinister. But if we take a step back and get rational, maybe we don't want a full-on military response every time people are scared. Taking away the bomber's Miranda rights may sound like a good idea at first, because let's be honest, we want to take away everything we can from that Miranda Rights, right to an attorney. We may ultimately take his life. If he had a cookie, I'd want them to take that from them. In fact, I kind of wish the cops would give him a cookie just so they could snatch it back. But it's when we're most scared and most furious that we have to fight the hardest to keep our rights and minds and rational brains. When it's nice outside, no one's talking about taking away rights. It's when it's scary that a drift towards police state becomes the easiest. Isn't that when the quote-unquote terrorists have truly won? When we're willing to give away our rights quicker than the virginity of a 17-year-old nerd with rosacea at a Comic-Con meeting his first girl who's proud to have a tape on? Maybe we shouldn't give it away that easy. Not to mention, turning Boston into an all-out war zone probably didn't make people safer. This is a photo of a bullet hole through a second-floor desk chair of a young man who lived next to where the cops had their shootout. If someone had been sitting in that chair at the time, we would all be asking different questions. And the housekeepers would probably have their work cut out for them. I'm not saying I have all the answers here, all right? But we should all have some questions. That's been your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. The music playing at the end here is No Song, played with permission from my friends in the band Rebel Inc. Check out their stuff. Also, we added a Punch Apathy in the t-shirt to the Moment of Clarity Kickstarter. It's only going for a few more days. Go over to the Kickstarter, help the show, get the shirt, keep fighting. Why not?
No facts, no truth, no system that can't be broken down by the youth. There's no religion with no lies. It's so odd, no offering plate to pass on to no God, no white.
The traditional light bulb, a groundbreaking invention in 1879. Other groundbreaking ideas from that time, the whalebone corset, the pedal-operated submarine, and the two-story outhouse. We've come a long way since then. It's time our light bulbs did the same. Visit EnergySavers.gov and learn about energy-saving light bulbs. See, these new bulbs are more efficient than the old ones, like a text message is more efficient than a carrier pigeon. They last longer, too. Like how we humans last longer now that doctors use antibiotics instead of leeches. And they cut down on our energy costs. Because in our own groundbreaking age of aeroplanes and moving pictures, we deserve a light bulb that saves us some cash. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. We were just speaking with Matthew Filipovich, host of the Matthew Filipovich Show, about right-wing reaction to Boston. And as if we needed further proof of how the right-wing media is radicalizing their listeners, and how those listeners are in turn radicalizing our Congress.
Or it's just directly to them. Maybe they listen to it and they're being radicalized themselves.
That's true. Louis Gohmert never fails to disappoint.
Well, it's WorldNet Daily's radio show. This is awesome.
It is unbelievable. If it's not bad enough that they bungled getting this guy picked up and his brother picked up and questioned before they blew up people in Boston, then now to get him to shut up when he has invaluable information potentially is just really egregious.
So they bungled, they got him to shut up. So they think that he thinks that Miranda was they actually wanted him to shut up.
That's it. So the Obama administration wouldn't have liked to know if there were additional bombs. Oh, wait. They did question him for quite a few hours before his Miranda rights were read. Yes. And at a certain point, they wanted to charge him with the crime, and his rights were required to be read at that time.
Right.
So, and that's not all Louis Gohmert had to say on the issue?
No.
Oh, why am I not surprised?
No, it's because of the people in the administration.
does not technically declare a terrorist act.
And that's an outrage itself.
And so some people are wondering whether or not the fact that it looks like radical Islam is once again a factor here is potentially a narrative that some folks don't want publicly out there. Do you think that's playing into this at all?
I think it is. I mean, when you got the defendant's mother saying basically they were radicalized, and you've got and that this was an act of radical Islamization, and of course she's out there wanting to talking about Allahu Akbar as well. It's very clear to everybody but this administration that radical Islam is at war against us, and I'm hoping either this administration will wake up or a new one will come in at the next election before irreparable damage is done, because radical Islam is at war with us. Thank God for the moderates. That don't approve of what's being done, but this administration has so many Muslim Brotherhood members that have influence that they just are making wrong decisions for America.
There you have it.
Dear God, there was so much crazy in there. I don't even know what to start with. If Louis Gohmert is a moderate, we are all screwed.
Big time. Big time.
So according to Louis Gohmert,
thank God for the moderates. He couldn't. It is easier to see Russia from Sarah Palin's house than to see a moderate from where that guy sits.
I think you're right on that, Shino.
That guy is, wow.
It is really scary that people like that represent us. Just imagine the image that those type of comments portrays to the rest of the world. That's our elected leaders. If that doesn't scare you into going out and voting come midterm elections, I don't think anything will.
Are you using fear tactics to get people to in the election?
I think that's more of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's fear, but I think we all have a right and a reason to be embarrassed.
No doubt.
That somebody like that would represent us.
Yeah.
I know I am. Yeah.
That's a little loony.
Oh, good God, Louis Gohmert. He never failed to disappoint. We're going to be right back.
I think he's useful.
A useful idiot?
I think he's useful in the fact that for us to say, you need to stay away from this.
I think that is damaging. I think that is a freaking
but I'm
recruitment
about
commercial.
Politically.
No, but I think statements like that, statements that all Muslims are bad, all practitioners of Islam are bad, those are freaking recruitment commercials for terrorist organizations, for radical organizations. That's saying, look, remember we told you that America hates Allah and hates Muslims and hates Islam? But here's proof of it.
My point is, isn't that a recruitment for vote Democrat?
Amen to that.
So that's all I was saying.
Let's hope so. But we're going to talk about voting and about issues that weigh in on what voters think with David Bender, the political director of Progressive Voices, coming up next.
It's Thursday, April 25, 2013.
Playgrounds in the vicinity that are just completely blown away. It's almost like a scene out of Terminator.
In the wake of the West fertilizer explosion, the chemical industry pushes for more fertilizer plants and less regulation.
2 barges previously loaded with liquid natural gas exploded.
We just had a third explosion.
Yet another fossil fuel disaster on the Gulf Coast. California now has more solar workers than actors, plus...
And that fat would otherwise have ended up down in the sewers causing what we call a fatberg.
East London's new idea for turning waste grease into electricity.
All of those new ideas and bad ones straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
As you know, normally I don't care much for the environment. If it's that important to protect it, why isn't it Scotch Guardian?
Not enough scotch? This is your Green News Report.
And then about 20 minutes after the first alarm, the earth shook and the sky went dark and West changed forever.
Okay, Desi Doyen, a very somber day today as we go to air. A memorial service taking place near West Texas. President Obama speaking after the horrible fertilizer plant explosion that took place last week, one of many stories that got lost during the Boston Marathon bombings, and in this case, an explosion that was far more deadly than what we saw in Boston.
Yes, I think most people are shocked at the scale of the devastation.
If they hear about it.
President Obama praised the sacrifice of 12 volunteer firefighters killed in last week's plant explosion. That injured more than 200 people, caused an estimated $100 million in damage to the town. As the investigation continues, we spoke with Ramon Galindo of RT America, who is on the ground in West, on the surprising scale of damage caused by this one facility.
There are buildings that are completely burned down more than half a mile away. It sent the foundation of the fertilizer plant 100 yards away. You can see playgrounds in the vicinity that are just completely blown away. It's almost like a scene out of Terminator.
It was incredible. And the point he makes about playgrounds blown away, remember we had a nursing home facility nearby, a middle school, a high school right next to this plant.
Yes, the preventable tragedy in West has also exposed the lax state and federal regulatory environment, which apparently skated by on luck up to now, relying on voluntary self-reporting from companies. The plant owners ignored federal disclosure laws requiring them to inform the Department of Homeland Security that they were storing 1,300 times the legal limit of toxic explosive chemicals. And Texas state agencies are also passing the buck of blame, saying the plant oversight was not in their purview. But the risk of explosions at fertilizer facilities could go up. New applications to build new fertilizer plants have jumped in towns across the country as the chemical industry tries to capitalize on the sudden glut of cheap natural gas in the U.S. Natural gas is the primary feedstock for synthetic fertilizer. Meanwhile, the American Chemistry Council, the powerful lobbying arm of the chemical industry, is right now lobbying hard in Congress to squash new legislation intended to boost oversight and security of hazardous chemical facilities.
Taking a page from the NRA, they're going on the offensive after a disaster like this, it sounds.
Another fossil fuel accident down in the Gulf.
The bay doesn't need any more oil in it right now. Explosions. We can do without some explosions for a little while.
2 barges transporting liquid natural gas exploded in the harbor of Mobile, Alabama Wednesday night, critically injuring 3 workers, causing the evacuation of nearby businesses. Officials say it appears that a spark ignited the barge's partially empty tanks, but the incident highlights the risks of proposed new liquid natural gas export terminals that the industry is now lobbying to build at the nation's ports. They say the facilities are safe, but critics point to this incident as highlighting the facility's inherent danger and even as tempting terrorist targets.
And how many explosions were there ultimately on those barges last night?
I think 7 was the ultimate count.
Unbelievable.
Here's an idea: turn fat into electricity. East London's water treatment company is turning an operational nightmare into opportunity with a power plant that diverts waste, fat, and grease from restaurants before it can clog sewer lines, and they use it instead to generate electricity, according to Simon Evans, the chief flusher for Thames Water, in an interview with The Guardian.
Really? He's called Chief Flusher?
He's called the chief flusher.
And that fat would otherwise have ended up down in the sewers, causing what we call a fatberg. So we'll take that fat off to what will be the biggest fat-fueled power station in the world, and everything that we don't use will be pushed out to the national energy supply grid, and it will go to run homes and businesses in the area.
Finally, some good news. The solar industry in the U.S. is leading job growth in several states. California has more solar jobs than actors. Texas has more solar jobs than ranchers. And overall, America now has more solar energy workers than coal miners.
Well, there's a couple of good news pieces in a row. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. If you would like to learn more about these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. If you have a nomination for who should be the chief flusher in the United States, drop us some email. greennews@bradblog.com. We'd love to hear from you. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Oh, the yellow rose of Texas is the only gal I love. Her eyes are even bluer than Texas skies above. Her heart's as big as Texas, and wherever I may go, I'll remember her forever because I love her so. There are so many roses.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Hopefully, we have the one and only David Bender, the political director. We do.
Indeed you do. Okay. How are you, Danielle?
I'm doing great. We had to pick up the phone right as we were coming back in here, so we were like, well, it'll be really interesting to see if somebody else is on the line with us.
This is what we call radio verite.
Yes. David Bender, the political director of Progressive Voices. You can check it out at progressivevoices.com.
It's the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn, by the way.
Yes.
Exactly right.
And you can follow along on Twitter at Prog Voice. How are you, Mr. David Bender?
I'm doing great, and I also want to give a shout-out to you guys because you're also part of the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. At top of the hour, we hear you, the two of you, every day on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. And that's a great thing.
We enjoy doing the top of the hour segments, and we just added the Progressive Voices player, the TuneIn player, to the front page of TalkingLeft.com so that everybody can listen to it at all times.
And then I see it's right at the bottom of the player. There's the hot link, and you click on that, it goes to progressivevoices.com.
Yes.
Well, let's just take a second to talk about this. Is the right has controlled talk radio for more than a decade. 15 years, perhaps 15, 20 years. They've put a lot of money in. It was a conscious strategy for the right wing to take over talk radio and block, including Air America, as it turns out, anybody trying to get a message out, a progressive message out. This is now a new world in which we live. It's a new digital world. It's a new mobile world. And the mobile network is absolutely the future of broadcasting. Terrestrial radio, as we all know it and remember it, is going away, the way rabbit ears have gone away for television. And Progressive Voices and the Progressive Voices app and Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn is the future, but the future is right now. And I'm hoping that everyone who listens to Talking Left, who understands this, is going to be a part of this. Because if we get out ahead, frankly, as we did, as progressives did with the Internet, for a long time, conservatives and the right wing did not understand the technological changes that were happening. That's one advantage of being a progressive, is you accept change more quickly. Well, the change is here now in the way we communicate. And the mobile network is not the future, it's the present, and we are out in front. And the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn is the cutting edge of that.
I absolutely agree, David, and I think that we're finally starting to see an actual political effect that corresponds with that change in media technology, with apps like Progressive Voices, with independent radio like TuneIn channels, and with Twitter and Facebook, and just this immediate connection with the voting public. For instance, there is the response we've seen since the gun legislation failed in the Senate. And while, historically the NRA would have controlled an issue like that, anybody who tried to implement gun control would have been politically slaughtered. And we're actually seeing the reverse happen, where Pat Toomey's getting a big bump and Kelly Ayotte, who voted against the legislation, is going down in the polls.
Dropped 15 points.
Yeah.
Approval in a week.
Do you think that is the result of this better communication line between party issues and party voters?
I do, but I think this is one of those things, Danielle, that if you look at it with 90%, 90+%, you can't get 90% of Americans to agree on what day it is.
Yeah.
And 90% of Americans, and slightly more than that, approve of background checks, universal background checks, which the Senate could not agree on. So this is something, regardless of how you communicate it, people are angry. The good news is that this is the first time in a long time that the Democratic Party, and particularly our president, has
kept his foot on the accelerator here and said, we are not stopping, we're going forward, we're going to hold people accountable. This is not going to be one of those things like Virginia Tech or Aurora that happens, people are horrified, and people forget about it. Newtown was different, and it is qualitatively and hopefully quantitatively different in terms of the results that we're going to see in our politics. But I agree with you that the way in which people are talking to each other has changed the dynamic. But this is absolutely reprehensible. And if you talk about how broken the system is, when you have 90% of the American public agreeing on something, including a majority, by far a majority of members of the NRA, so-called members, agree that this should happen and it can't. Yeah, and just one quick thing. A lot of people are pointing fingers at the Democrats. Max Baucus, the three Democrats who were up for re-election, Max Baucus has now declined to seek re-election, and Heidi Heitkamp, the new Democratic senator from North Dakota, they're pointing at that. Here's the truth. We needed one more Republican.
Right.
We would have had all of those Democrats if one more Republican had come aboard. We had 5, we needed 6.
Well, and that's kind of a moot point anyway, because by original definition, by how the Senate was supposed to originally function, the bill passed. It got the majority of votes. It just didn't pass this Republican obstruction point known as the filibuster of 60 votes.
Exactly right. No, you're right. And again, I want to talk about, just for a second, the frustration that everybody has, certainly we do, at the lack of filibuster reform. We all thought it would happen at the beginning of this session. Harry Reid, who has been pilloried, has been heavily criticized by people on the left for not pushing through filibuster reform, didn't have the votes. And you know why? He didn't have the votes from Democrats.
Right, and that's actually something I would really like to get your opinion on, David, because we're speaking with David Bender, political director of Progressive Voices. You have a vast knowledge of how the political process really works. And isn't that one of these situations where you bring the legislation to the floor anyway, you get a vote and make people see where their elected officials stands on it, make their elected representatives say, no, I'm going to support this broken congressional system. I'm going to support this method that allows nothing to get done, or I'm going to stand with the American people. Why not just bring it up for that reason?
Well, in a parliamentary situation that Harry Reid found himself, he was negotiating with Mitch McConnell, and he understood that he didn't have the votes to back his play. He couldn't get to 60. So what he did, and this is a judgment call. You have to walk in someone else's shoes to understand why they make that call. But the judgment that Harry Reid made was, I'm going to try and get those things done that I can get done by not going to the mattresses, as they say in the Godfather movies, about the filibuster. I'm not going to win if I do. So what's the best I can get? He got a gentleman's agreement with Mitch McConnell, and since Mitch McConnell is not a gentleman, it doesn't amount to much. But he also was able to bring some things to the floor in the short term that he might not otherwise have been able to do. This was the idea. The idea is to get the best you can get. It's a broken system, Danielle. It's totally broken. So you make the best of it that you can. And frankly, I think that's not enough. I think we're at a point now where it's not making people vote and holding them accountable for not standing up for what we all think is right. We have to fundamentally change this system. And I don't know how that's going to happen. It's going to require something that is outside the box. A lot of people over the years have called for things like a constitutional convention. They've called for, the kind of extra legislative approach and response. It can't be done through a broken system. You can't fix it from within. And that's a very daunting task. But that's the truth. That's where we are right now. Maybe something will happen. That's what people talk about. They talk about a crisis will, a scandal will allow for money to be restricted in politics if there's some kind of scandal. I don't buy that. I don't buy that argument anymore. Watergate happened, and we went on to business as usual. I continue to believe that it's going to take something outside of our political system to fix it. I'm looking for those ideas, but frankly, it's not going to happen with Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell. They can't do it.
Unfortunately, I wish I could disagree with you, but, we've seen years of this and no movement on so many issues. I mean, even now, again, Senate finally passed a budget, and the Republicans refuse to even allow it to be debated, to allow a conference to happen. I mean, this is just issue after issue, and yes, it's very easy to blame the Republicans, and I think the majority of the blame goes there. But
Absolutely.
At some point, do we need, I know he's not a senator, but do we need more Alan Graysons? Do we need more Senator Bernie Sanders? People who are willing to stand up there and hold these people's feet to the fire publicly instead of kind of playing along and using soft language. What do you think that would make a difference?
Well, what I believe is that Americans, sort of by tradition, are not inclined to the kind of mass outrage that this situation demands. We saw it during the war in Vietnam. We saw people taking to the streets in huge numbers. To some degree, we've seen it actually over the Keystone Pipeline. We've seen people out in the streets, and that's going to go through. In Europe, they have a much different approach to the institutions of government. People will, in fact, stop going to work. They will take to the streets for weeks and months at a time. What we saw in Wisconsin should have worked. It was the right approach. The only thing that went wrong was that people didn't like the idea of a recall. But that kind of movement is what needs to happen nationally. Well, people need to stop contributing to this system while it's broken.
Well, hopefully things don't have to get worse before they get better. But I learn something every single time I talk to you, David. We really appreciate you taking time for us today.
It's always a pleasure. I wish I could be more optimistic. I am fundamentally optimistic. I believe that we can fix it, but it is not going to be through traditional means. We have to think outside the box. And what you and Shano are doing every time you talk to people on this program is to help people think about that. And thank you for what you do.
Well, and thank you for Progressive Voices. It's because you took that same idea of finding a solution to a problem and having to think outside the box. And with people like you, I do have faith that these problems will be solved. It might not be tomorrow, and it might be in ways that we don't even imagine yet, but I fully believe that we will get there. Thank you so much, David Bender, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Have a great day. David Bender, the political director of Progressive Voices, he knows everything about everything, so you may want to listen to things that he tells you. You can check it out at progressivevoices.com. Of course, listen on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn and follow along on Twitter at ProgVoice. We're coming right back with more here on Talking Left, and we still have Gotta Laugh coming up, so don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and this is Talking Left.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harper.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of CrooksandLiars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Great presidents aren't born, they are made. We've got to push people. They don't jump out in front of a parade if there's not a parade there. That is political suicide. The parade, metaphorically, already has to be in the streets with the picket signs saying, we need progressive talk in Portland, or we need marriage equality in Washington, or we need marijuana legalization in Colorado, whatever.
The Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Stop
the pipeline.
We have to push for our positions because they're not just going to out of thin air.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. Of course, our home sweet home, We Act Radio, 1480 AM. So we were just talking with David Bender about GOP obstructionism. And there's one story that we have touched on many times here on Talking Left. And we
touched on?
Yes.
We've been beating this drum for a while.
Yes.
Because it's one that needs to be struck.
And it's
loudly.
related to that filibuster that David Bender was talking about. We've spoken about the National Labor Relations Board positions being Obama's
nominees.
Recess nominees being invalidated by the district
D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals.
Right.
This is a case that happened late last year. And one of the reasons that we thought, and when we were talking about filibuster reform before it went, that one of the most important things was advice and consent. Because while we recognize the House, because of gerrymandering, is under Republican control, the House doesn't vote on nominees. Advice and consent is only in the Senate. And the Senate is using that, the filibuster in that situation, or the threat thereof, to deny judgeships, leadership roles. We have the ATF.
Right. Which is pretty notable.
Consumer
recently.
Protection Financial Bureau. We have N.L.R.B. Well, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals itself, I mean, it has 11 spots and only 7 of them are filled.
Right.
And then we had the guy out of Iowa, was it Grassley?
Yes.
Who said, let's just get rid of those.
Yes.
Let's do a reverse FDR. Let's unpack the court.
Well, one of those nominations that Obama made during a recess is Richard Cordray. He is currently the acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And he is pretty much accepted as the chairman of that agency by most individuals in Congress because the D.C. court did not invalidate his position.
They issued a ruling that it should be, but they stayed that ruling pending appeal, which, by the way, was appealed Friday.
And is currently waiting to go to the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court. Well, we don't know that they're going to hear it, but the appeal has been filed.
Right. Well, Richard Cordray will be presenting, he has presented a report, his semi-annual report on issues the C.F.P.B. has been dealing with. He's presented it to the Senate Banking Committee.
All that oversight that the Congress wants and say is lacking in the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau's Act.
Right. Yet
there's no oversight.
Some in Congress that complained that the CFPB shouldn't exist because of that lack of oversight prevented Director Richard Cordray from testifying in the House, saying that his position is not valid, is not legal, that they do not recognize his chairmanship.
That's a big deal.
They are breaking the law.
That's a big middle finger to the executive branch saying, you've appointed this guy. He wants to give the information that would allow oversight, and we're going to say, blank you.
That's also a big middle finger to the consumers, the American public that this agency serves. It's a big middle finger to the justice system that decided to not weigh in on his chairmanship. I mean, they are perfectly capable of invalidating his position if they felt that was necessary. They did so with the N.L.R.B, the National Labor Relations Board. Right. So Maxine Waters spoke on this matter, saying that he should be allowed to testify. She said, quote, I suggest that Chairman Henserling, he's the representative blocking it, allowed Director Cordray to appear before the committee to deliver his report as required by law.
There you have it.
She did not mince words, so...
She rarely does.
Yes.
And we love her
She's
for
one
it.
of my personal favorites. So this is something we should all be watching. Watch this appeal. Watch whether the House of Representatives upholds the law and allows Richard Cordray to present his report. We'll be right back with Miss Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival. You can check it out at politicalcarnival.net. Stick around. Danielle and Shano here.
What is this? What's going on?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Gosh, it seems like only yesterday that we saw George W. on TV reading The Pet Goat to some second graders. But now he's all grown up and has an entire super-duper king-size library filled with big books and other neat stuff, all dedicated to him. Bush's pharaonic presidential center is now open, allowing us commoners to dig deep into the shallowness of his achievements. The enormous building itself sets the tone, sharp edges, high brick walls, and the welcoming feel of a fortress. Yet the ex-pres insists that it's a place for public contemplation of his legacy, quote, a place to lay out facts. How ironic is that? After all, the Bush-Cheney regime was infamous for its disregard of facts, as well as its constant hiding, twisting, and wholesale manufacturing of facts to fool the people. On everything the regime pushed, from going to war over Iraq's non-existent weapons of mass destruction, to its plan to gut and privatize Social Security, facts were whatever Bush, Cheney, Rumney, Rove, and Condi imperiously declared them to be. More ironic, and even insulting, is the centerpiece of the library's attempt to whitewash Georgia's 8 awful years, an interactive exhibit called Decision Points Theater. And theater it is, portraying George heroically as the decider on such big moments as Hurricane Katrina and the Wall Street collapse. Visitors to this rigged exhibit can use touchscreens to see Bush getting contradictory advice, then taking a bold stand. The whole show is meant to make you feel sympathy for him. Then you're asked to vote on whether he did the right thing. Again, irony. We the people got no vote on these issues back when it would have mattered. This is Jim Hightower saying George's library is as big a fraud as his presidency was.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A U.S. steel plant in Canada could soon face its second lockout in less than 4 years. Jesse Russell reports.
Workers at a U.S. steel plant in Canada have rejected the company's most recent contract offer. By a vote of 70%, the workers, who are represented by the United Steelworkers, voted down the contract. The union is asking the company to come back to the bargaining table. If the company refuses, the union has the power to call a strike by the end of the week. U.S. Steel could also lock out the workers, a move the plant has been preparing for in recent weeks. They've idled a blast furnace and have trained managers and other non-union staff on how to handle production work. This won't be the first time workers at the plant have faced a lockout. U.S. Steel employed the tactic in 2010, denying employees access to work for 8 months. According to the union, workers are unhappy with the number of concessions the company is seeking. Some of the concessions are related to cost of living allowances, holidays, pensions, and benefits.
Hundreds of Chicago fast food restaurant and retail workers walked off their jobs Wednesday, starting at 5:30 a.m. Workers at McDonald's, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, Macy's, Sears, and Victoria's Secrets joined the job action in Chicago. The strike was because the workers want living wages that really support families and the right to form unions without interference from employers. Victor Guzman works at a Chicago McDonald's making the state minimum wage of $8.25 an hour.
We are fighting because we have to pay food, I have to pay school, and I have to pay my bills. So $8.25 is not enough.
This worker action is part of the Fight for 15 campaign, seeking a livable wage of at least $15 an hour at fast food and retail businesses. The Workers' Organizing Committee of Chicago says the Fight for 15 campaign is working to put more money into the pockets of 275,000 fast food and retail workers in the Chicago area. The biggest fast food workers' strike was in New York City just a few weeks ago. At a news conference in Washington Wednesday, flight attendants, including the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, continued to push back against a TSA policy of allowing small knives back on passenger planes. The unions representing flight attendants say no knives on planes ever again. The policy change has been delayed. Veda Shook, president of F.A.A. CWA, says her union will not stand down from the fight to keep knives off planes. She says the union is focused on a legislative path that would permanently ban knives from commercial airline passenger cabins. This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
I don't know how to talk like a parent. Don't make me come back there. You see what I mean? It's pretty awful. Try it again. Don't make me come back there. Now that's pretty good. That one kind of sounded like my dad. Weird.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit AdoptUsKids.org for more information. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shana.
Welcome back to Talking Left. Thank you for joining us wherever you are checking it out. We are speaking with Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival. You can check it out at politicalcarnival.net. You can follow her on Twitter at Gotta Laugh, and you can submit a blunt video. We'll explain that in just a moment at email address blunt@politicalcarnival.net. Laffy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, hello, Danny.
We are so excited to speak with you. It's been much too long since we heard your lovely voice on this program.
I know. I've missed you guys a lot.
So there's so many good, important, amazing stories over there on the Political Carnival. It was hard to narrow down the choices of the ones I wanted to get your personal take on. But the one that stuck out biggest to me was your coverage of Dick Cheney's son-in-law and how he deregulated the chemical industry. Can you explain that? Just a brief synopsis for people who may not have caught this story?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to actually quote Chris Hayes, because he actually gives us a synopsis. It's a perfect synopsis. The Bush administration, this is from Chris, the Bush administration's own cabinet secretaries, he's talking now about Christine Todd Whitman, who was head of EPA, and Tom Ridge, who was head of Homeland Security. They came up with a plan to regulate the chemical plants, and it was stymied by Dick Cheney's son-in-law, Phil Perry, once. Okay, then the Bush administration sided with the chemical industry when it was brought before Congress. And then in a backroom maneuver, Perry, that's Dick Cheney's son-in-law, he does the chemical agency's bidding by moving oversight of the chemical industry from EPA to where he was working at DHS. Now, the chemical industry hated EPA, and the chemical industry felt that they could easily manipulate DHS. So that's the gist of it. His son-in-law went from being the general counsel of the White House Office of Management and Budget to the general counsel for DHS.
And now this may come as a shock to people who haven't heard this story, because you think chemicals and you automatically think that it would fall under the Environmental Protection Agency. However, it was moved to the Department of Homeland Security, who, as you cited, Laffy, Chris Hayes mentions, the DHS did not even know this plant existed until it blew up, killing 15 and injuring hundreds, right?
Right. They didn't know that, not only that, they didn't know that the West Fertilizer Company stored ammonium nitrate. And then according to Congresswoman Betty Thompson from Mississippi, they didn't know about the plant until it blew up. So, I mean, we're talking about no regulation, none.
Right.
And people's lives were at stake. People died because of this. And also, the West Fertilizer Company was storing more than 1,300 times the amount of ammonium nitrate that ordinarily would trigger some kind of an alert.
Right. This dangerous chemical, the same one that was used, that Timothy McVeigh used to blow up the commit the Oklahoma City bombing. This is just a prime example of how these backroom deals affect our national security. You know, Republicans constantly whine and moan about defense industry spending and how that relates to national security, but yet these are the backroom deals that they're making that really do put our nation so much more at risk. I mean, can we even imagine here, Laffy, how many situations there are like this? How many plants there are that DHS doesn't even know about?
And you know what else is really disturbing is the people of Texas seem pretty laid back about this. They're just sort of, we feel really bad for what happened, and these are well-meaning people at this plant, and I'm sure it was a mistake. No, if you don't get and the public at large, I'm not even sure is paying attention to this story, other than the fact that there was a lot of people that were hurt or killed, and that there was some destruction. But I think it kind of, not to use a bad word, but it was blown aside. It sort of was put aside because of the Boston bombing and all the things that were happening all over the country with Syria. I mean, not all over the country, all over the world with Syria and other hotspots. So we're not getting the full story. We're not paying attention.
Right, and it's really scary. I mean, in that comparison, we see what an actual act of terror could do in Boston. It's horrendous. The loss of 3 lives there, the police officer later, the injury of hundreds. Yet we see that mismanagement, under-regulation, or lack of regulation caused an even larger catastrophe at the same time, yet it's treated like no big deal. I mean, does this have to happen in everybody's backyard for people to get pissed off about it?
I don't know. And you still have, people on the right screaming, keep your government out of my whatever, and while they're putting their government into women's whatevers, So on one hand, they're saying, we don't want to regulate it, and they're playing politics with people's lives here. Right. They're saying, well, we like the industry, it's making some money, so let's, leave them alone. And on the other hand, they're jumping headlong with their big government intrusion into the private lives of women, their physicians, and their families.
Right, and it's interesting that you brought that up because it was another one I wanted to ask you about from over at thepoliticalcarnival.net. We're speaking with Gotta Laugh. President Obama came out recently saying Planned Parenthood is not going anywhere. This is the first president to just flat out say it so forcefully that Planned Parenthood and the help that they give to women is here to stay. I was really proud to see that statement be made, and for once, a president not skirt around that issue. What do you think, Laffy?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm thrilled. He was the first one to address Planned Parenthood directly like that, too. And again, you've got the GOP saying they want their outreach program, their reinvention, and how there's no war on women. Of course there's no war on women, as they spend all their legislative time trying to shut down abortion clinics or legislate somehow to make legal abortion illegal by any way they can, whether it's restricting, the codes for buildings in different states. And on the other hand, as we were just talking about, there's no regulation at all when it comes to something that can kill people. So I'm really glad that President Obama really had the guts to come out and say what he said. He said that the GOP is turning back the clock, and if you look at Mississippi, a conservative state, they turned down legislation like this, and he said if you're a woman, you're on your own, this isn't right, that when it comes to women's health, no politician should decide what's best for you. Absolutely. So there's your big government intrusion, and the outreach is a sham. I mean, I go on about the the outreach thing over and over and over at the Political Carnival. Yeah. I mock them mercilessly because almost every day I have at least 2 or 3 posts that show the opposite of outreach, and this is one of them.
Yeah,
not what the president did, obviously. What the GOP is doing.
Right.
I mean, state by state by state, GOP governors and GOP legislatures are making laws that there's no way to overcome these laws because there are hardly any Democrats in their legislatures, and so they easily make laws that will essentially outlaw abortion by building codes or whatever they can come up with.
Right, insurance codes, building codes, these skirting around the issue because they can't directly outlaw abortion, so they just make it logistically impossible. And yes,
exactly.
These laws can be challenged to the Supreme Court, can be seen as a violation of Roe v. Wade. However, by the time that's done, abortion clinics don't exist in a particular state, and the woman who is trapped in that situation likely will have already given birth to a baby many months before that, if not years before a case like this would make it to the Supreme Court. So,
or you'll have women who get abortions anyway,
Yep.
only they have tragic abortions that can end either their lives or their lives, or they doesn't end their lives, but it severely injures them. However it works out, they're dangerous. And instead of looking out for women's health, they're looking out for what goes into their into their pockets. So, yeah, it's appalling what's going on, and of course jobs are suffering, but they won't legislate jobs bills. They won't try to care for the people that way, where people are unemployed and need work so they can pay for food and for housing. Instead, they're going after women.
Right, and going after useless legislation, like you cite in another post at thepoliticalcarnival.net. Angry GOP lawmakers disconnect with leadership. That even when potential time could be spent on legislation, even when something beneficial for our nation could happen, instead you have lawmakers doing things like voting for what must be the 55th or 35th or 36th attempt to repeal Obamacare, even when they say it's symbolic. And it turns out, from what you post here, that party leadership isn't too happy about these tactics. Did I gather that correctly?
You're almost got it. The party leadership is butting heads. And by the way, this is when they're not on vacation. So let's just, we want to throw in that they're only here a couple of weeks out of the month.
Good point.
Yeah. So there was a bill that was going to supposedly boost GOP voter credibility, and they were going to transfer like $3.5 billion of funds that were meant for disease prevention to a temporary high-risk pool plan that would cover people with pre-existing conditions to undermine the president until the rest of his Affordable Care Act could kick in after 2013. And there was some controversy about that. Like one veteran lawmaker said, to put this up to a vote knowing it would lose, they've lost their minds. And you have House Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy and Majority Leader Eric Cantor at odds over this bill because we all know they've lost their minds, which they did anyway. So you've got them butting heads, and then you've got them, putting something in, wasting, like you said, symbolic votes. This is basically a symbolic vote because they knew it wouldn't pass. And so you've got a bunch of Republicans saying there's been a disconnect with leadership, and they're angry. Meanwhile, the good news is that they're losing some political leverage with when they come to a fight over the debt ceiling with President Obama, because they're kind of a mess. Their little disarray thing is happening, Yeah,
I think that's why Karl Rove and his conservative victory party, or whatever nonsense he's calling it, has gotten involved in the way he has, is trying to get their party back under control. Because, pieces like this that you've posted here, to me, indicate that if things keep going like they're going in the GOP, there will be a party split. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there was one on the left as well. If we, I'm not advocating for that. I don't think that our system is designed for that. We don't have the political infrastructure to account for this. So a split to the GOP would benefit the Democrats or vice versa. But, if they keep going like they're going, there's going to be two parties here, Republicans and either Tea Parties or conservatives, whatever they want to call themselves. Do you see any other end result with this ongoing action time and time again by the Republicans?
It's really hard to see how they're going to come together. When you look at immigration reform, they're split over that too. And you're looking even at this health care bill, split over that. They're split over gay rights and civil rights in general. What about voter suppression? There's so many things that you see, some of them moving into, well, we don't look good, so let's sound good and let's put in a couple of decent votes, and maybe the voters will come back to us. And then you see others who are saying, no, our ideology won't let us do that. Or idiotology, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, better said. Well, Laffy, we always love a chance to speak with you. Unfortunately, we don't have more time today because there's just so much going on over at thepoliticalcarnival.net that we could do a whole show with Gotta Laugh. But thank you for taking a few moments with us and going over these important stories, and for all the work you do over at the Political Carnival.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
We love you.
Mwah.
Mwah. Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival. You can check it out at politicalcarnival.net. You can follow her on Twitter at Gotta Laugh. And as usual, all those links will be up with the blog post after the show. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Just a few more minutes in store for you today. And we've got one really interesting story. It's not small potatoes, so stick around.
It's just implied, but we all know what's going on in this thought bubble. The kids don't know, but we do.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK, and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
You're listening to and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
It's a redefining of the issue of not just the fact that, oh, it's my fault, I need to go buy a Prius. I should get an electric car. No, it's my fault for not stopping car culture as a whole. We don't need cars. I should have far greater technology right now than the internal combustion engine. It's 100-year-old technology.
Where is my jetpack?
Exactly. But you get the point. The issue is far larger than just recycling or driving a hybrid. It's stopping the manufacturing of these systems, these industries that need to stop. You know, we will never have national health care guaranteed as a right for all as long as we have insurance companies that make money off of us. So the insurance companies need to go away. We don't need insurance companies. We need health care. You know, it's the whole health insurance reform. What a lie that is, because we need health care reform. And the list goes on. So it's redefining the issue and redefining the argument.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, and you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Cormall. That's CORRIMAL. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
Hey! Are you living in a progressive talk void? If so, be sure to visit leftwingradiosstations.com. The state-by-state listing is a quick and easy way to find any left-wing talk radio station across America, from sea to shining sea. Your progressive talk nirvana is only a click away at leftwingradiosstations.com. Be sure to like Left Wing Radio Stations on Facebook and share it with your friends. leftwingradiosstations.com. United we stand.
SoFloRadio.com remains on the air with free archives thanks to the support of our listeners. Help keep us on the air by clicking the donate button on SoFloRadio.com. And thank you for your generous support.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Big thanks to Gotta Laugh of the Political Carnival. And I was so busy listening to her great analysis on all those topics that I forgot to ask her about blunt videos. For anybody who isn't familiar with the blunt videos over at Political Carnival, it's a really cool project that you can participate in. Laffy puts up a topic and you can send her a 30-second video, your response, your comment, whatever it is that you want to say or act out, or however you want to be a part of that issue. And she puts them all into a really cool video with music and posts them over at Political Carnival. Right now that page is having an issue, but she has a link to it, to their YouTube channel. So
got it.
Really cool stuff. And you could submit your take on her issue to the email address blunt@politicalcarnival.net.
Just take a little video with your phone, whatever you want to do. You know, it doesn't have to be like, you know, professional, crazy
webcam
production value, because Laffy takes them and then she produces them and puts all kinds of graphics and you know, she spends a lot of time on them. They turn out great.
Yeah, they're really cool. And if you haven't checked them out, go over to politicalcarnival.net. You can follow the links there and watch some of the ones she's done. The most recent one was a response to the Senate doing nothing on gun control. And it's really amazing to see people's individual take on it. So before the break, I teased you, and Shane told me I should be shot for a really bad pun because I wanted to. Really, really bad pun. The story that we were going to do is not small potatoes. Anybody who watches our show regularly knows we usually do a Trust Buster segment. These are companies, organizations, what have you, that need to be broken up or that need to be prevented from becoming monopolies. And wholesale grocers, Associated Wholesale Grocers, has, according to them, identified another major problem. Are you ready for this one, Shane?
I'm ready.
According to their claims, America's potato producers are a cartel that operates like OPEC.
So they're colluding to set prices.
They collude to set prices on Freedom Fries.
I knew you were going to take that joke. Your Freedom Fries are now just plain old. What? They're Middle East fries, I guess, because it's like OPEC?
I guess so. According to the suit, they are actually suing over this. They say the potato producers fix spud prices to the tune of $25 billion a year that industry makes. Do you believe that? That's it.
Now, you may not know the answer to this. How many potato producers are there? What market share do they have? I'm trying to figure out how many actors it is that are colluding.
They don't say the specific number, but they say that potato growers in 12 states control 80% of the market. Okay. And what makes them, what the wholesale grocers is trying to use as the collusion evidence is they're all represented by United Potato Growers of America, UPGA. Okay. And since joining UPGA in 2006, 80% of potato producers have increased their profits.
Yeah, but just because, that could be a lobbying group.
Right. That's now, essentially what it is.
Does this lobbying group negotiate prices? How are prices negotiated?
They say they control the market by reducing the supply.
Oh, so they're not setting prices. They're just varying the amount of potatoes output.
Right.
Oh, and they're agreeing. So, see, the thing is, I'm all for exposing this, stopping things like this. It's hard to prove collusion, but when it's,
Well, but interestingly enough,
are they exporting them? How are they controlling?
They're
I have lots of
exporting
questions.
them to other states.
They're what?
They're exporting them to other states.
It's interesting because the reason I asked that is it's a lot like gasoline.
Yes, that's why they're comparing it to OPEC.
But we're exporting gasoline out of the country, which leaves the supply low here, and therefore prices go high.
They're exporting to other states. So as OPEC stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, I think potatoes should be OPEZ, Organization for Potato Exporting States.
There you go.
This is a really bad pun story. I know. It's really cheesy, but they're just right there. You have
I like
to grab
cheesy
them.
Fries.
I'd like cheesy fries, too.
So cheesy's all right.
Yes. So several hundred growers from California, the complaint, act as a cartel.
I'm
we don't
interested
know.
to see how it turns out. The more actors there are, the less likely there is collusion. Unless that group is there for the purposes of setting up, a way.
I don't know. And this case will be investigated because it's going to trial.
So it's not the FTC that's bringing this. This is just
no, because they are not governed by the Sherman Antitrust Act. There's a specific one, the Capper-Volstead Act, which permits agricultural cooperatives. So there's different legislation that applies here.
Wow, we have to look into that. We'll do that as Trust Busters next week.
Yes.
I learned something new.
As I said, it's no small potatoes. It's messing with the nation's food supply. So I can make these jokes, but it is important.
Of course it is.
People are affected by the actions that this organization could be taking. So I'm glad that it's being investigated. I'm glad that somebody is standing up to some form of cartel, albeit a potato cartel.
If it exists.
Yes. I wanted to remind everybody to go over to democracyforamerica.com and vote for Jacob Dean. That link will be up after the show. Thanks to our great guests, Matthew Filipovich of The Matthew Filipovich Show, Gotta Laugh of The Political Carnival, and David Bender of Progressive Voices. Thank you to Nicole Sandler and RadioOrNot.com, to George Rodriguez of SoFloRadio.com. Thanks to everybody at We Act Radio, Alex Lawson, Kimon Freeman, Pete Callahan, Rich Webster, David Schuster, Daniel Marins. Thanks to Rocky Mountain Mike for our intro music, and to Dano Songs for our bumper music. And anybody listening over on We Act, stay tuned for Mark Levine. He'll be coming up next. Thanks so much, and we will see you guys again soon.